we're here today, and I just want to take a minute and say I'm super grateful for to have you guys all on here today and to participate in this. This is super exciting for me because I've had this idea for quite some time, and I've been harassing Jamie about it for quite some time. And I just really wanted to get this off the ground, and I really appreciate your time and efforts. And it's a Friday afternoon, which is a huge sacrifice, and it's super nice outside. So I know that I'm probably going to be paying some dues back for this later, or probably for the rest of my career. I can just imagine the favors I'm going to owe for this, but I really appreciate you guys being here. It's interesting because I was talking to my dad last week, and he said he used to always say to me, never be the smartest person in the room. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And so I feel in good company with you guys. You guys are all really smart in what you do, and I really am excited to see what you have to pitch into, building a clinic or in the processes of building clinics and or managing through kind of what we're going through in dental right now, and just getting some expert advice and being able to participate in this kind of learning atmosphere is really great for me. And I know it's going to be great for some of the people that are on here, because we're kind of all muddling through this new adventure, going through dental and pandemic situation, trying to grow clinics, and just life in general. I kind of just meshed up all things together, and it's created this maybe different atmosphere that we're kind of just figuring out. So that being said, we do have chat set up here for the people that are watching. If you have questions, just shoot it through the chat. We'll answer them as we kind of go through what the presentation is. We're also going to push this out on audio video later. And you have the registration already from this, and we'll send it out to you. So if you aren't able to attend and you signed up, or you got to step away, or your Wi-Fi dies, or you decide to go golfing halfway through this, it's here, and the information is still going to be here for you, and you'll be able to learn and grow with us. I just want to do quick introductions. So kind of we'll just start with my list, because I don't know which way everyone shows up on Zoom. They always seem to be in different spots, but we'll start with the first one on my list, which is Justin Sharp. So he's the CTO, do I have that correctly, of CareCrew? Yep, okay. CareCrew is a dental practice growth platform that intelligently automates daily operations to enhance productivity and maximize profitability. Their powerful technology is backed by a team of experts ready to help optimize dental practices and enable better decision-making for growth. So I guess the question I have for you, Justin, is kind of what is your role in your company, and how do you like to spend your free time when you're not working?
I am aware of many hats, as CTO, so that's the Chief Technology Officer. I primarily am this interface with a lot of our large partners. A lot of our big, partners, as well as big customers, to be that technology bridge into the company. So as a founder, I remember writing the first few lines of code of the platform. I mean, that's definitely transitioned into a much more customer facing role, where really being able to assist, giving that feedback into the product and engineering teams, right? And letting them, do a lot of that more day-to-day building that they do. Right now we also have the customer success team also reporting into, what I manage. So really close to the actual day-to-day management of just the overall customer experience, from post-sale, going live, nurturing these practices to make sure a lot of their pain points are solved. So, I speak to, I have quite a lot of knowledge of all departments within CareCrew, which really, when it comes to that customer journey and the customer experience, I think I'm definitely the guy to speak to how to implement CareCrew to the best of its ability so that these practices are successful.
Awesome. And what do you do on your free time?
I like to golf when there's 3 months of summer that we have. I should say 1 month of summer, and then a month of spring, and a little bit of month of fall where we can can actually golf. But I do enjoy that. Doesn't mean at all that I'm a good golfer at all. But I do in the wintertime love to ski. Definitely like getting outdoors and doing all the different activities there. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, welcome to the panel. Appreciate having you here. We'll go to Mike Clarke, who is the Vice President of Workforce Staffing Solutions. Workforce provides recruiting services for companies and job seekers across Canada and the United States. They offer temporary and permanent job opportunities for employment candidates, and they help companies hire for short-term and long-term job opportunities. So Mike, tell me how you kind of got started in the staffing industry a little bit, and then kind of what brings you the most joy in the role that you're playing right now.
Yeah, for sure. So Workforce, we've been around for 23 years now. We have a huge blue collar side of our business that focuses on construction in Western Canada. And then we started a new division a couple of years ago that is laser focused on the dental industry. We chose the dental industry because when I looked at all of the issues when I looked at the people that were trying to service the dental industry, I found a tremendous number of issues that I felt that we could address and solve. We launched almost 2 years ago next month, and then of course COVID hit. It put things on pause for a bit. And then over the last, 7 months, we've experienced quite a bit of growth, and it's quite exciting to see where this is going to go. What I really enjoy doing is, building things that solve problems and making things work. And I feel like with this dental division, what gets me excited is that it's such a disaster in the dental industry that I feel like we can just bring some real solutions that are shockingly have not been provided to your industry for a long, long time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for being part of the panel, and I'm excited to hear what you have to offer and for advice and tips and stuff as we kind of go through this. Jamie, you are a Henry Schein sales rep, and Henry Schein, for those, I'm sure 90% of people here know what Henry Schein is, but it's a solutions company for healthcare professionals powered by a network of people and technology. They have over 2,000 team Schein members worldwide, and the company's network of trusted advisors provide more than 1 million customers globally with more than 300 value solutions that help improve operational success, clinical outcomes, and clinical outcomes. So they do like so much, all sorts of things. I feel like Henry Schein has their hands in everything, which is awesome. But I guess really, how is your role changed in the last 18 months? Because I feel like the visit sales rep person is kind of less and less. And that's kind of, I just want to delve into that just a touch.
Sure. So thanks for having me, Theresa. And it's an honor to be amongst all of you guys. You guys are the best in the business. And I've vetted a lot of people. So you guys are definitely rise to the top. We only have till 4 o'clock, so I better not go into how my role has changed and everything that I do now, but that's okay. I'll give you a little highlight. So it's been a steadily evolving role. I know about 10 years ago when I started in the business, it was a transactional thing where, my only job was to go in and get dentists to buy something from me every day. And, as I've educated myself more, spent time with great people like you guys, got to know more fundamentals of the dental business side of things, it's really evolved. It's evolved into a consultant. It's evolved into a confidant, somebody who has these businesses' best interests at heart. And that's really important for me and a lot of my colleagues because, the cool thing about sales in dental is that it's a direct relationship to the success of the clinic and the practice. The better the clinic and the practice do, the better we do. It's not like you might buy a car from me once and then you might buy another one in 5 years. It's a great relationship, a trusted relationship, and we're symbiotic in our success. So it's really important for me to not only educate myself on all aspects of the business and where I can offer support and facilitate growth, but also surround myself with people like you, Theresa, Vic, Mike, Justin, Tom, just to name a few, because, you guys are the cornerstone that I utilize in order to make my clients' businesses better. So in a nutshell, it's changed a lot. COVID has sort of reverted us back to being product finders and PPE sourcers and, price fixers and things like that. And, that's certainly an important aspect of the business that we continue to strive to get better at. Maybe I can sum it up by saying, Theresa, I overheard you say to one of our mutual clients, talk to your rep, chat with them. If you're having challenges, this is what we do every single day. So whether it's a challenge on the expense side of things, a challenge on the production side of things, we pride ourselves in being the best at finding solutions and helping you get through that. So the role has definitely evolved, and it's been great to support a lot of clients and help them grow their businesses. So
yeah, it's awesome. And I do say that a lot, calling a rep. Sometimes it's a deflection of what I have to do, but sometimes it's because you know more than me, and that's a good position to be in. So what's getting you really excited in life right now?
I think we have a really cool opportunity. The pandemic was also obviously a big issue when we had our shutdown. Us around here at Henry Schein, especially in Edmonton, we did our best to try to sort through, with the help of Tom and Yates Whitaker, sort through some of the government programs, the assistant programs, to sort of guide our clients in the right direction. When we came out of COVID, dentistry rebounded like no other industry. I think we were all actually really shocked at how fast patients got back in the chair and production grew and things like that. But we're sort of coming to the end of that deferred bubble of patients that we had to put off is gone. We're struggling with challenges. We're struggling with people changing appointments and cancellations and, things that we've never had to deal with. But I think the cool thing is it's made business owners more responsive to, looking at your analytics, seeing how your business is growing. How can you improve? How can you sustain long-term? That's what gets me really excited, because that's my background. My background is business. My background is revenue. My background is, patient communication, things like that. That's what really excites me. So it's a cool opportunity that, we can revolutionize ourselves as practitioners and business owners. And I'm excited for that moving forward. So
awesome. We'll go to Vic next. He is the owner of Luxate Digital Marketing. They provide marketing solutions for existing and new dental practices, from social media management to unique and ad campaigns, and promotions. They understand unique challenges facing practices in this digital marketplace. What got you started into marketing in the dental field?
Well, marketing was always a thing that I had a flair for. But my dad is actually a dentist, still practicing downtown, and for 40 plus years now. So he's a dental OG. So literally born and raised listening to dental problems around the dinner table. And my wife is a dental assistant. Her sister's a dental assistant. My wife now manages a clinic because she can't assist anymore. My best friend married a dentist. So I'm just like, it's just everywhere, man. So if you can't beat them, join them. So my mom is also the manager of the clinic. So my dad is in the dentistry, and then they make a good team, because while he's in the weeds, she kind of keeps her head up a little bit to kind of see the bigger picture. So they play off each other quite well. But despite all that, they didn't have a website ever until like 2.5 years ago or something like that. And I kept harping on them, like, you guys need a website. You guys need a website. And they're like, yeah. Just like, I'm just a kid. So why listen to me? Anyway, I built them a website without them knowing, and then got control of their Google business account, yada, 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 all that good stuff. And then, colleagues just kind of started noticing, and I got a few questions here and there, and I thought, maybe there's a little niche here. So turns out it's a really underserviced little area of the world. People tend to take advantage of dentists, and particularly in the marketing sphere, it's kind of stuck. In like the late 90s, early 2000s, as far as like best practices for what marketing is. I think in large part because it used to be, it was not a good thing to market as a dentist. It was like, thinking about like my dad's generation and his friends, like, you did not market, period. It was bad business. And obviously that's changed a little bit. So the paradigm shift is starting to move more to where people all went too far in a lot of areas where people market a little bit too aggressively sometimes. So striking that balance is kind of what inspired me, and having people not take advantage of people like my dad. That was kind of it.
Awesome. And what is something you couldn't live without in your life right now?
So this is going to sound maybe silly as a guy who's like a marketing person wearing like a spangly shirt, but a pocket knife. I have had a pocket knife since like, I still got it right now. A pocket knife since I was like, I don't know, grade 4. And I've had it every day of my life. And you look like a hero on Christmas morning because you can open everything. And you'd be surprised how often it comes in handy. So
That's awesome. You're like a scout.
yeah.
That's awesome. Tom Christensen, he is a managing partner at Yates Whitaker, and Yates Whitaker has been putting clients first for the last 25 years. The cornerstone of their firm is personal relationships that they build. They build relationships based on trust, reliability, and assisting their clients to grow their business and personal security. What is the best part about your job, Tom?
Best part, maybe surprisingly coming from an accountant, is getting to know the clients and what their goals are. That's my favorite part, and figuring out what is the vision they have for their future, and then making a plan around that vision, because it can be very different. Some are like, I want to own 10 clinics. Some are like, I never want to own a clinic. Some want to own 1 clinic. Some want to partner with friends. Some want to do all those things, and then talking them through each of those, the landscape of what those things look like financially and the challenge those that they'll have. And then I also like connecting people to team. I'm a big believer in teams. And so just knowing that, hey, financially you need these advisors, and then here are some other sources here's some other personnel resources that you can call on to achieve your goals. I really like doing that. So I like to spend a lot of my time figuring out what everyone who touches dentistry and healthcare does, and how they can help, so that when I see a problem or a need, then I can send somebody there. So those are probably the 2 favorite things of my job.
Awesome. And then for those of you on the panel that don't know me that well, or those of you who are watching, my name is Theresa Smith. I am the company leader of Optimized Dental. We provide honest help to build a clinic in a way that you can manage, structuring culture, clinical care, and strategic growth by developing protocol systems and helping manage people. So mostly I manage people and build teams and set up networks on probably a smaller scale than Tom, but essentially I help clinics gain the potential that they have by helping people fix small problems and work through them, and a lot of operational issues. And I am a lifelong learner, and that's why I wanted to do this, because 1, I get to be in this room with you guys and this virtual room with you guys and learn as much as I can, and obviously apply it into my life and what I'm doing in my practices that I'm helping out. But also it's just a good opportunity, because I think education is the best way to kind of make life better. So the more you know, the more you can grow and learn. And this is kind of why we wanted to do this in the first place. So super happy to have you guys here. Thank you so much for being here again. And I guess we can just roll into the first case study, which essentially we're going to take, let me just get this set up here. We're going to take share a screen here and go over a case study that Tom put together for us on the financial plans of a practice. And I'm just going to go up, sorry. There we go. You guys are good to see this. I always feel like stupid saying that, but yeah, here we are. This is 2021. We should be used to it. Okay, so I'll let you, Tom, take it away for a little bit here and kind of go over this, and then just let me know when to change the slides.
Perfect. Yep, you can. I won't make it too geeky, boring accounting wise. So yeah, this is just all about. I guess the overall theme of these will be optimizing clinic values and different ways to do that. So I just came up with a little bit of a case that everyone can chime in on. So yeah, go to the next slide and I'll walk you through kind of what the agenda is. So the first one is I wanted to lay a bit of groundwork, and then will not take too long at all, just discussing what financial statements are. And then we'll go over the 2 most common components of financial statement, a balance sheet and an income statement. And then always I wanted to tie that into value, because that is what a lot of clinic owners want to know. They're of course concerned about cash flow and income, but they're also wanting to know where their clinic value is trending, and then into the case study. So yeah, next slide. So this is the bit of geeky accounting stuff, but I just had to do it just because everyone wanted to talk about financial KPIs. They're like, what are your KPIs? What are your key performance indicators? So I was like, okay, hold on. Whenever you're talking financial KPIs, I always have to caveat that with the accountant likely did not do a whole bunch of work on the numbers to make sure they're accurate. Because there are 3 levels of work you can engage an accountant to do. The one that everyone hears about is an audit. They're like, oh, what's an audit? I don't know. That means that accountants ask you lots of questions, do sampling and testing, and they call suppliers. They'll see who you owe in your clinic and call them to make sure that's accurate, at a cutoff date. And so there's lots of work that goes into an audit. And really what you're doing is you're trying to get third-party evidence to back up the numbers. A review is kind of a middle step where you're going to see if the relationships between the numbers are plausible. And so you're going to ask some questions and say, oh, okay, well, this is weird. Like your revenue went down, but your supply costs went up 3-fold. Like, how did that work? Why is that normal? So we'll dig into the numbers a little bit more and ask some questions and rely on some analytics, and then a little bit of evidence to gather. And then the last one's a notice to reader. And that is almost what every clinic owner will get, because the higher you go up the chain to a review or an audit, the more you have to pay. And typically a clinic owner will only want to pay an accountant more as if a third party makes them. And so the third party that makes them is typically the bank. So sometimes if you have large groups, they might get audited financial statements or reviewed statements, and the accountant's really going to dive in there and communicate and hammer down those numbers. But for the most part, 95+% of dentists, they get a notice to reader. So that means accountant gets some books from the office manager, bookkeeper. We do some basic calculations that the bookkeeper or the office manager can't do, like depreciation, like calculate the taxes, put back up in our file so we can stamp it, and then send it out the door. So that's just important to know that usually if your clinic owner comes back and they're like, I was at a seminar and it said that anything over 7% of supplies, I'm paying too much supplies. And I just met with my accountant and it's saying 18%. Well, that could be because there's lab costs in there, there's ongoing service fees, IT, repairs and maintenance, a whole bunch of stuff has just been bundled into that account. And the accountant is not being paid to dive into that and allocate it properly. So that's just a big caveat whenever we're talking about KPIs, is that usually we're not dealing with audited financial statements. So you just have to be careful when you're bringing it into the expense side of the equation. Okay, go to the next slide. So this is the 2 most common components of a financial statement you'll see are a balance sheet. So this is just what a clinic is doing at a point in time. So on this example, it's the year end is June 30th, 2019. And so it's just showing as at that date, this is the position of the clinic. There's cash in the bank, there's assets, we have equipment. That equipment number is not a value that you've bought everything for. That's a depreciated down value. So every year we use some math and we figure out, oh, well, these types of equipment fit in this classification. So therefore we're going to depreciate this much. And so then you're taking from the cost. So that number shrinks every year if you don't buy anything new, but it's not indicative of what your clinic actually cost to get built. And then the liability side, that's who you owe. That's fairly self-explanatory. And then the equity side is there's some math to it, and it's kind of it's a fairly, there's a lot in a retained earnings number, but one way you can think of it is it's your assets minus your liabilities. And there's a historical measure to that. Not all assets are recorded on a balance sheet. So if you built a practice from scratch and goodwill just appeared because you assembled a team and you have patient flow, you wouldn't have paid for that. So it wouldn't be measured in the financial statements. You have to measure that somewhere else. So retained earnings is your assets minus your liabilities. And also it is also the sum of your income statements since the beginning. It's like a cumulative balance of income statements. That's what retained earning is. And that's what a balance sheet is. So it is trying to communicate the position, the financial position of a clinic as at a point in time. Okay, the next one. So the income statement is a more intuitive statement. that's where the money came in from and where it went out to. So there you can see just in this kind of case, which is a fairly maybe standard case of a clinic owner who's doing fairly well, as they've got, money coming in from dental services, obviously, from hygiene, obviously. They're spending in all the different accounts. They have different types of insurances. They're spending advertising, promotion, professional fees, salaries, and wages are at 30%. So off of these numbers is where some of those KPI percentages or industry standards get driven. They're off of the aggregation of all of the financial data that's been reported through StatsCan, and StatsCan ultimately gets fed from CRA. So this is kind of an aggregation of some of the KPIs you hear from a financial perspective. And by financial perspective, I mean tying in your expenses to your revenues. That's where a lot of that is. So, salaries and wages, 29.6% of revenue. Okay, great. Professional fees, 2.8%. Seems a little high. Advertising and promotion, 1.47%. That's what a KPI is. So an income statement shows what you did in the fiscal year. And then at the roll of a new fiscal year, that gets zeroed out and you start again. And it's just, so every year, the income statement will fluctuate up and down depending on your activity. So it goes for 12 months. And then after that, it gets reset to zero and you have the start of a new fiscal year where you're going to measure your performance again over the course of a year. Okay, next slide.
Before we go to that next slide,
Yep.
I have questions.
Awesome.
So looking at that, then and just a quick review, because I don't know the level of everyone's knowledge, obviously, and I know for myself, as an office manager in dental, I didn't really get exposed to this information a tremendous amount, for good reason. I think in general most dentists kind of keep this stuff on their own, but like when I moved into a corporate atmosphere, we were much more privy to this information because it directly affected what we did on our day-to-day operations and how we influence those operations. And so I just kind of would like to go through this just a little tiny bit here and break it down for those people who don't really understand, because I think as an overall high level, we have a pretty good understanding if you've been exposed to this a bunch, but if you haven't been, it might be worth just kind of reviewing what the percentages are, because I know a lot of office managers or dental leadership or even just new dentists coming out aren't going to understand that the dental service fees and the hygiene service fees, what that split is and what a healthy split should be. So obviously dental service fees is just overall production of the clinic, and hygiene is just overall the hygiene production of that clinic. And we're seeing that the dental side production is at 67 and the hygiene services are at 33. And why would we consider that a healthy split?
That's a good question. I'd open it up to the panel. I mean, the more hygiene you do, hygiene is where that is really the driver of a lot of clinic value. So the higher percentage, and that's kind of it's a loaded stat, because sometimes you see if the hygiene percentage is really high, you're like, oh my goodness, that's a really, really good clinic. But since the hygiene percentage is a percentage of revenue, sometimes that means that the dentists aren't just doing many procedures, they refer everything out. And so they're just checking it and sending everything out. So then you have a very high hygiene because maybe the dentist is towards the end of his or her career and they're referring everything out because they're not comfortable to do procedures. So it is kind of it's a loaded stat. It can go two ways. Sometimes it means the dentist isn't doing as much. Sometimes it means that the hygiene department is really, really has a high standard of care and things are working smoothly. So that'd be my input. It's kind of a loaded stat from my vantage point.
Yeah, I think you're right, Tom. It bleeds into so much conversation, and it's so case by case specific. I have the ability and the fortune of seeing multiple practices in the area in the Northern Alberta market. So we're able to create some benchmarks and some averages that we see amongst practices. We obviously sort those into top, medium, and low performers so that we can give some advice to practitioners and clinics on how to improve things. But, you're absolutely right, Tom. Case by case specific. If you have a practice that's placing a ton of implants, high revenue generating procedures, it's going to inflate that dental revenue number. There's no question about that. So if it does that, and then the hygiene floats around 20%, well, that may not be a terribly unhealthy practice. So it's all about analyzing the actual case by case basis and making sure that things aren't falling through the cracks. So for example, if I had a practice that was doing a ton of implants and I know it was going to skew that hygiene number, well, then the next thing that I would look at is I would look at pre-appointment and reappointment rates, including recall, right? So I would use a metric, let's say from Care Crew, to make sure that I don't have 50 or 60% of my patient base not enrolled in hygiene. And if I did, then I would immediately look at solutions to try to fix that, right? So it's great to set benchmarks. It gives us a starting point. It's great to analyze case by case basis. But, as far as it saying, well, I should be this, you alluded to your dental supplies, I should be at 7%. Well, okay, you probably should, but there's a lot of things that go into that conversation. So it's important to surround yourself with people who have the experience and know how to analyze the numbers so that you get real data and know how to respond, right? One last thing on the hygiene revenue too is that you alluded to value of the practice, Tom. We're going to get into EBITDA calculations a little bit later. Hygiene revenue, there's no normalization process for hygiene revenue. And what I mean by that is if you're a practitioner who, you're going to sell to a corporate entity, let's say, that dental revenue now that you're producing as the owner operator, they're going to need to pay a wage of 40% in order to continue producing that. So what happens in that case is there's a normalization exercise. That normalization exercise takes 40% of that revenue from the production side and adds it to the expense side. So that's taken right off of your net profit. What happens if it's taken off your net profit? Well, there's an adjusted purchase price then, right? With the hygiene revenue, the salaries are baked into the salaries and wages 90% of the time. There's some, commissions and things like that that we can look at, but 90% of the time that expense already exists. So there isn't a further normalization when it comes to analyzing purchase price of the practice. So it's a super important line item to look at. It's something that you should try to influence. It's something you should try to build up. But again, if you're looking at a P&L and all of a sudden you see it's at 20, 22%, maybe don't freak out, maybe just take the time to analyze where that number is coming from, right?
I think, sorry, my voice is going groggy already. I think that it's interesting that we had that conversation just now, because when I used to look at the hygiene numbers and like building a healthy hygiene practice, we would always pull the analytics and like manually pull the analytics and do the hygiene dollar per hour and work through that. And it's obviously very time consuming to do it, but I found it very beneficial to be able to use that information to help guide my team, to help kind of manage what's happening in the team, and then to further diagnose into those problems. And I know Justin probably has a huge amount of skill and expertise on that background. So do you have anything to pitch in on that? Because I feel like it's a huge part of operating a clinic is knowing those things.
Operating any business, it's your key performance indicators, they've got to be readily available. Like if it's out of sight, it's out of mind, if it's not really easily understood by the team. So part of an exercise of if we're talking about increasing your hygiene business is first getting an understanding of what sort of KPIs do we want to be driving. Obviously not trying to, complicate things and have a list of 100 things that all mean different things that we want to drive, but really getting down to simple things like Jamie mentioned, which is pre-appointment. Really getting us, that's where it all starts, right? With terrible pre-appointment. And it is probably one of the easiest things that practices can fix too. So when you see a practice really struggling with hygiene or complaining about not really getting enough hygiene business, typically you go to their pre-appointment percentages and you find out that they're like 60%. And it means that almost half the patients walking out the door just are walking away without their next appointment. But back to the having the actual numbers, Theresa. I mean, that's what we hear all the time. There's all this stuff that a lot of what we have, it all lives within Dentrix or EagleSoft or ClearDent or Track or whatever you're using. It's just really hard to parse, right? And it's just not readily available where practices are able to take action on it. And it's generally something that maybe one or two people, generally just one, knows how to pull in the practice, which is a problem, right? And it's something that you need to align your entire team around.
Yeah. And I think for me, when I was managing, it was like managing large practices, it's easier to engage an entire team if they kind of know what they're shooting for. But if you can't show them what they're shooting for and constantly have that like readily available, like this is your goal, this is what you're working towards, this is what we, need to have happen, nothing happens in the clinic, because you
Absolutely.
have 20, it's like herding cats. You have 23 people going different directions, and getting effective team engagement it just doesn't happen. And so yeah, it's just having those numbers active, like readily available, is huge in my world. And I work with a program now that I have to manually pull them still, and it's just a treat. And I like being able to pull the numbers and know them and use them and drive the practice where I want it to go. And having that information is just a massive play in my playbook. I guess it's a massive win for me.
The best dental practices,
go ahead.
Those goals are well understood by the entire team, and I should say the best companies, right? Everyone's aligned around what you should be driving. What are the performance metrics that represent whether we've had a good hygiene month or a bad hygiene month. That needs to be easily well understood by the entire team. So you've got alignment on everybody driving towards the same goals as a business. Yeah, and that kind of goes back to what Tom was saying about building teams and getting things driven. It's no different on a small scale as it is on a big scale. If you're working for a management team, if you're looking for your hygiene team, I mean, when we build an operational clinic, I build them out into small teams that build into a structure of an overall team, right? So it's no different to do it the same way. And I think that's the most effective way to get all the cogs moving in the same direction so that you can kind of get things moving forward. You also said in here, Tom, about the staffing costs. And sorry, my screen is so tiny because I'm sharing multiple things going on and I can't see where that is. Where
staffing costs towards the end, third to the bottom. So it's 952,000 and it's 29.6% of revenue.
Yeah, and that's also another thing on there that becomes it fluctuates and changes and a good, that's what we would consider in a healthy range. But there's things in there that influence a healthy range too as well, right? And we kind of went back and forth, I think you and I, Tom, multiple times about healthy staff costs, because if you have your bookkeeper on staff, as part of your person, is that influencing your staff costs? If, there's just lots of variables that go in there. So can you tell us what kind of overall, like just a high level view of what kind of attributes to a good staff cost?
Hard to say. The first thing I would say is what's in the number. So oftentimes baked in there is sometimes, like, for example, family members of the dentist who don't actually work in the clinic. So again, it goes into like, what is in that number? So people like to talk about the number, but I mean, for the purposes of your financial statements and the information that CRA gets sent over, which makes its way to StatsCan, which makes its way to the industry standards, it's like, what's in there? Because sometimes you'll have, I've seen every family member on payroll before. And so, okay, that's makes the staffing number look larger. I mean, I'll say most dentists now coming out of the pandemic are pretty focused on keeping it lean. And so a lot of them are trying to gun for 25%. I think that's pretty hard to hit. I haven't seen too many hit it, but
that's very lean.
Yeah, that's really lean. And then are you actually saving anything? Or are you just shifting money, or you're just shifting costs over to subcontractor costs, right? Because it's like, okay, well, that's still a cost just because your bookkeeper was on salary before and now they're in a subcontractor. It's still the same cost. Value wise, it might be looked differently. Like when you value a clinic, it might look differently. So it's a loaded number. I would say historical normal range is 30-35% would be typical what I would normally see. What's healthy or not, again, would be case specific. Sometimes people take on a lot of things they could subcontract out and they bring it internally into the clinic. And that, of course, inflates the figures as well, right? Like if you've got somebody running a CEREC machine, they'll save in lab, but then what costs are being allocated to run the actual machine, right? Somebody's doing it. So it's hard to say. You really, again, going back to what Jamie said, is it's case by case. You have to look at how the clinic is built, what the vision of the clinic is, and what the goals are, and then you would probably try to get down into a range, that an expected range. So something that has a CEREC, I would say, oh, it might not be noticeably different, but it'll be different. The lab costs will certainly go down, but there are some costs. Now, sometimes the dentist works that machine pretty extensively, so then maybe that's not going to be reflected in salaries and wages. So it's really hard. You just have to really, KPIs are good at a high level, but really when you have to understand what's behind it, what is behind the numbers.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that we talk through this, because I feel like everyone does get hung up on the numbers a lot, and they get kind of stuck on them, and it always makes me kind of dither inside a little bit when someone's like, oh, we need to hit this number, and I'm just like, oh, well, let me look at what's going on in your clinic, because operationally that might not even be attainable, right? And if it is attainable, I could get you there maybe, but you might not be the happiest person when we get there. And like, there's all these things that play into these numbers, and how we live. These numbers are actually like a living, breathing thing once they get going. So is there anybody else on here that wants to chip in on this before we move to the next slide?
Just one more thought on the staffing. Bring it to COVID and bring it to now. A big influence on staff cost is turned into dead chair time, right? And cancellations and things like that. I mean, how many office managers that are on the call, or business owners that are on the call, have hit those plateaus where you're not sure, do I need to hire another hygienist? Should I bring on an associate? Do I need another assistant to facilitate growth? It's almost like a build it and they will come type thing that we used to do in the past. I think with COVID now, I've seen a lot of clients that have consolidated hours. We're running into issues solutions where we're no longer cannibalizing the day schedule because we opened an evening, right? We're trying to keep as much dentistry within a certain amount of hours as possible, and patients have been quite responsive in most of the situations that I've been involved with. They've been making arrangements to come in during normal hours. So, Mike, I know I've worked with you in a couple situations where, testing the water to see, could we facilitate bringing another hygienist in? Is our revenue there? Is the patient demand there? The beauty of working with somebody like Workforce is you don't have to make a long-term commitment prior to realizing that that's going to be a benefit, right?
Yeah.
So if you can, just talk about that example we were talking about, that would be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in every industry around the world, they utilize temp agencies for a couple different main reasons, but one of the reasons is to make that bridge to full-time, to hiring a full-time person. It's impossible for a dental office to hire someone for 1 or 2 days a week. The size of pool of available candidates that are interested in 1 or 2 days a week is so tiny that you're just not going to find anybody. So people go to staffing agencies and utilize temps for, to create that extra 1 day of hygiene every week or every month to start. And then it builds up to the point where you're at 2 or 3 days a week using a temp agency. And then all of a sudden, boom, you can pull the trigger on a full-time hire. We at Workforce Dental Staffing, when we came into this, a lot of people told me, oh, Mike, you're in for a world of hurt. There's nobody available. There's nobody there. And I said, yeah, I've heard that before. So when we got in and we started, recruiting people for our temp jobs, what I realized was that 90+% of the people that we were recruiting were working full-time, quote unquote, but they were underemployed. And they were trying, because that dental office maybe was only doing hygiene 3 days a week, or maybe they were closed on Mondays, or maybe they close once a week every month because the dentist goes on holiday. So what we've done is we've organized this workforce, and all of our candidates set their availability in a calendar in their app. So what I try to encourage practices to do is number one, utilize temps if you're looking for that growth to bridge to a full-time hire, but also utilize people and their availability and schedule your hygiene around that. And what I mean is that, if you were to tell me, Mike, I'm looking at hygiene in a couple weeks on Tuesday, that's one thing to say, Mike, I need someone on Tuesday. But what if I were to say, okay, let me look at that week, and I can give you 2 or 3 different options, and it's maybe Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, where I've got, 3 of my great candidates that are looking for work on those days, and then schedule the day around that. So it's just a different way of looking at staffing, as you grow, and utilizing a temp agency is definitely what almost every industry around the world use, to help with their growth. So.
Well, and Theresa, you can speak to that a little bit too, because I've, with our mutual clients, you've been a rock star at verbiage, as far as scheduling patients goes, and, helping fit into availabilities rather than just saying, yeah, we have all these open dates, pick one, right?
Yeah, and I think it happens a lot in dentistry, and it's full of people who want to help people, which is super awesome. They are designed, we hire them that way. They're super helpful. Reception especially are very helpful. They're people pleasers, and they want to make everyone happy, which is great. And that's kind of what we want, because that's great customer service. But what we run into is they think everyone can read and see what they see and know what they know. And so they get into a bit of I want to say a hot spot sometimes, because they put people when they want them, when the patient wants to be booked, or they put them in the spots where they think is the best spot versus where it's the best spot for the clinic. And so they think these patients can see their schedule. They think they can know what's going on in the dental clinic, but they don't see it. They can't know. And so if they say, oh, I want a Tuesday at 3:00, and they're like, oh, I just next Tuesday at 3:00 booked, and what am I going to do? And it's like, well, just find another Tuesday, because that's what they want. Or you can say, oh, I have this time and this time that work for me, and I can put you on a cancellation list. If something opens up for you, then we can get you in. And framing the question differently, and even just changing the perspective on the reception team a little bit on how to do that, because we just run into situations where everyone thinks that they have to totally 100% accommodate the patient. And although there is a balance and we do need to accommodate them, our whole business can't be run on what they need and want on 1 or 2 people of the clinic. Or if we see a huge demand for evenings, then we look at hiring someone on the evenings. If 10 and 2 is not busy at all, and maybe we stick lunch hour breaks in there and split the shift up a little bit longer, or have an evening, or stagger the shifts. There's lots of operational things to do to fluctuate that, so you're getting the most production out of the people that are in the clinic at the time. There's just so much that happens in the clinic, and those dynamics change consistently, but if you're not paying attention, you'll never see it. So that's kind of where we kind of work hand in hand with temping agencies, and the analytics, and seeing where people are coming in. That's all kind of plays into that operational role, but you have to be watching all the time to see it. And that's kind of the trick.
Yeah. And if I may add something, Theresa, I think what we see is, a big driver with companies, whether it's a dental practice or a manufacturing facility, schedule is one of the key motivators for any candidate. Of course, there's wages and location, but schedule is huge. And if you have your full-time staff, doing split shifts and, working, wild hours, and there's no consistency there, you're going to create an unhappy person, right? And that's then when, we typically get someone phoning us and saying, hey, can you help me find another job, which is great, but it's not good for that practice. So, I think everybody that's on here, be conscious of the schedule. When you're initially, you have your base of people, focus on, as you said, get your patients around your schedule rather than the other way around. But as you grow and you want to start, accommodating more evening stuff, think about using someone like us for to use a temp for 5 hours once an evening every week, where you can accommodate those people, rather than screwing up the schedule of your full-time staff and creating them that unhappy feeling, and then all of a sudden you're dealing with a total new rehire there. So
yeah, like test the water, see how it goes. I'm a big tester of the waters. So let's try this and experiment with it. And I think that's great input, Mike. Justin, you had some input there, I think.
One of the more subtle points to what you were saying, Theresa, just about not feeling like you have to accommodate all of the hours or all the different requests from patients just to protect yourself from burnout. I mean, I see it with, what my wife had gone through as a hairstylist, is, what my father might have gone through as a chiropractor, any schedule-based business, just to be able to kind of hold your own with, so that your metric for success is, are you able to deliver a great patient experience for every single patient? And, so long as you can't do that, well, then you need to adjust. But when you're ready to make that step over to growth, because it definitely is a mindset, and it's something that's not just, it takes, really a big decision to say, do we want to grow as a practice, which, a lot of practices do, but there's a lot of things that go into that, staffing, of course. But that's, when they're ready to do that, it's about how can we scale beyond our own means, and how can we scale what I do as a practitioner with other, associates or other temp staff. But when you make that switch, that's where everyone on this call, there's a team effort that goes into doing that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's just building out a vision for where you want your practice to go, and building out your team so that they're all harnessed the right direction, and you don't have 56 people pulling in different directions. So I think that's awesome. Tom, should we go to the next slide then, go over that evidence stuff?
Yep.
Perfect.
Sure. So this I just put is very simplistic, and everyone talks about values, and most everyone talks about, everyone looks at a multiplier. And so I just wanted to lay out how it looks. So on the previous side, we drilled down and we got to after-tax net income. So that's the first number. And then EBITDA is just basically adding back a few numbers, which is oftentimes done when you're calculating values. So they add back interest on long-term debt, add back income taxes, add back amortization / depreciation, and there you get an EBITDA, right? So that's $573,040 in this case. Then there's a multiplier attached to it. And so I just wanted to lay that out so people can see it. Most oftentimes in the industry, you'll hear clinic owners talk about, oh, I heard this guy sold for a 7.5 or a 7.75, or maybe even an 8, or maybe they're like, oh yeah, well, this appraiser, I got my appraisal back from this appraiser and it's only a 5 or whatever. And everyone's trying to figure out the multipliers. So I just wanted to lay out the impact of that. The multiplier obviously makes a big difference, but equally as important is what you are multiplying. And you're not always multiplying EBITDA. So if you go to the next slide, then I'll talk a little bit about that. So there's a big step in there that people tend to miss, is that it's not just EBITDA, because clinics are owner managed typically. So your accountant comes up with all these ideas of things you might be able to deduct or not, and those things impact the EBITDA because you get to net income and then they add back a couple of things. So there's all sorts of things that can be done that affect the EBITDA multiplier, and clinics are usually small owner operated. I mean, relative to the business community as a whole, a clinic is going to be much smaller than Enbridge. Enbridge has seas of compliance, and if you are going to expense that meal, then you have to go through all sorts of different checks and balances. Well, if the dentist is going to expense a meal because he or she wants to, they just expense the meal. So there's a normalization process that happens that's often neglected. And what you're multiplying has a large impact. And decisions that you make day to day in the clinic impact what the value is. So if your multiplier is 7 off of your net income, and you're looking and you're thinking, well, I think I should give this person a raise. They're really good. I like to work with them. They're good. The clinic. And so say somebody in hygiene gets a raise from $55 to $60 an hour. And so if they're working, call it, what would an average hygienist work, Theresa? You figure in a year?
Less than 32 hours, probably the average.
32 hours. So maybe we'll use a number of 1,000 hours. So this hygienist works 1,000 hours. They've just got a $5 raise. So that'll translate to $5,000. Like, well, that's only $5,000. We're booked. We can afford it. Well, value wise to the clinic, you've just decreased the value to the clinic $35,000 because it's multiplied by 7 when you're actually calculating out the value. And I'm not saying don't give people raises. I'm just saying that there's ripple effects to day-to-day decisions that you make in the clinic. As office managers, those things have a exponential effect on what the clinic value is. So from a value lens, and I'm not saying that's the only lens you should be looking at things through, but from that lens, you'd say, okay, well, let's perhaps pause a little bit before we just give raises, because $60 an hour is a nice round number, and we like this particular hygienist. Other things in there too, why you normalize them is there's, sometimes travel in there and vehicles, and they had a call it a trip for professional development that was 1 week, the course was, and they actually went 2 weeks. And so those types of things are, and there might be quasi vacation in there. So pulling out all of the things and making the EBITDA normal on an owner manager's business is a fairly extensive process. It's an important one. Also, things like I don't know a dentist who counts inventory at year end. So therefore, it's pretty certain that no supply percentage on the income statement is really, really accurate, because you don't know how much has actually gone out the door and has been consumed and how much is sitting on the shelves. You don't know that. So there are things like that where you go through, and that's part of the process, and it's a big one. So the income statements that accountant produces, and I get asked this all the time from dentists, be like, I want to know what my EBITDA is. Can you calculate that? Like, yeah, I can. It's pretty easy, but it doesn't really mean a whole lot, because I know, and the dentist knows, they have a whole bunch of stuff in there that if I own the clinic, I wouldn't let them do. So it's kind of the normalization process is really important. So I just wanted to walk through that, because everyone focuses on the multiplier, what the multiplier is, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7.5, but not too many people actually pay attention to, when you're selling, what is being multiplied. And so I just wanted to throw up a bit of caution on that. Then we'll go to the next slide and into the case where Theresa can take over and drive for a little bit.
Theresa, can I ask a selfish question of Tom?
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm curious, Tom, what you've seen pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID for the EBITDA multiples. I know we're not trying to, this point of the slide is to get away from the idea that there's this one sort of average number, but what typically have you seen?
For a multiple, like what
an
is
average multiple that you might come across, just to get an idea of how value multiples have changed, from pre-COVID, during, and then after.
Oh, the big consolidators, the big DSO, Dental Corp, 1, 2, 3, they set the market quite a bit, and so they retreated a little bit during COVID. And it really peaked probably September, October of 2019. Like there were upwards of 8 multiples being paid on things. COVID happens, big pause. We're not sure what's going to happen. Multiples decreased to maybe 6.5, 7, with big contingencies of if, then we won't claw it back. And then now it seems to have snapped back up pretty quick, so into the 7s again. But calculating out what they are multiplying is really hard, because was this just backlog of patients? So they'll come out with a pro forma and be like, okay, well, see, we weren't able to practice for 2 months, so let's just take that out and pretend those 2 months didn't exist. Okay, you could do that. And then, look how great I am coming out of it. Okay, why are you coming out of that great? Is it just because you have a big patient backlog you're still working through? Or is it because, and I've had clinic owners do this, and they're really fulfilling, is they took that downtime to really analyze what was going on. Okay, we have some team issues in this clinic, and maybe we should do this. And their snapback, I would call, is real. But the narrative and story around it is really important. So multipliers went down slightly, and they seem to be coming back up. I mean, as some people might know, Dental Corp's going public. So pre that happening, they're of course in buy mode and paying to get as much velocity as possible leading up to an IPO. So they're willing to pay a little more, but it's timing based, right? Will that persist? Possibly not once they're public.
That's crazy. The dental world's just swinging around these days. It's just momentum.
It's true.
A lot of momentum. It's good.
That makes it kind of exciting. When there's change, there's opportunity, and it makes it exciting anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so the case study and the whole kind of premise of this activity of us gathering together is to kind of break down a clinic that isn't doing so well. And so we've created a case study, or I should say we'll just give 100% credit to Tom and his team because they created the case study for us and put together this, which is super awesome. So thank you to Tom's team, because Tom came up with the idea, and I'm sure poor Tom's team had to pay the bill. So.
Yeah, mostly that is a mostly true statement.
Yeah. Okay, so the case study is Mr. Tim Watley, and I hope I'm saying that right. I don't want to insult Mr. Tim Watley. So.
Mr. Tim Watley was from Seinfeld. He's the dentist. It was actually he's the Breaking Bad guy. Heisenberg in Breaking Bad was Tim Watley, doctor dentist Tim Watley in Seinfeld, from Seinfeld fans.
That's awesome.
That's where I got
Although I feel like now I've totally dated myself. Okay, gotta go get some Botox again.
Dr. Nick Rivera is the Simpsons dentist as well, if you were curious as to where the name and Crux came out. There you go. Hey, all TV shows.
I wasn't allowed to watch Simpsons growing up, so I never got on that boat.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's sad. Conservative parents. Okay, so the case study is after 10 years as an associate, Dr. Watley built a new, beautiful 8-operatory clinic 3 years ago for $2 million in a great location. They built a great team. They have great retention. Clinic tries to attract the best team doing the best industry, high standards of care. Clinic has 4,200 active patients. They spend on advertising, but profits and cash don't seem to be there. Dr. Watley is watching his savings in the PC as well as personal erode quickly, especially since the principal payments on the debt kicked in during the beginning of the 3 years. What should he do? And so then we have brought up the numbers to kind of look at this. And forgive me, they're a little bit blurry because I'm having issues with my computer. But so because as we kind of walk through the numbers here, we look at Tom, do you want to work down the left side, like the balance sheet side, because you're way more familiar with that, and then I can work down the income statement.
Sure. Yep. The balance sheet, won't spend too much time on the balance sheet. Mm-hmm. Balance sheets are fairly accountant-y. So in here, what I see is we have probably a very grumpy bank at the end of the day. So we have $45,000 of cash. That's good. We're not insolvent yet, but we are possibly. We got accounts receivable of $85,000. We have inventory of $110,000. So that's supplies that haven't been used yet. So those are floating around the clinic. We've got property and equipment. So we built a clinic for $2 million, but then every year there's depreciation attached to that. So that number goes down every year and we haven't bought anything new. Accounts payable, $150,000. What that means is probably lots of people on this phone call are grumpy at this clinic because they haven't paid their accounting bill and they haven't paid their supply bill and they haven't paid their marketing bill and they haven't paid their advisor. They are because they don't have the cash to do it. So they are stringing out their vendors and in order to stay solvent, meet payroll, pay rent. Bank indebtedness, $200,000. So that'd be a line of credit. That's probably maxed. So they took the line of credit money and they have put it in, it's been consumed. They're starting to lose, and that's makes up the balance of cash that's in the bank. There's a little bit of money that's owed to employees for the next pay period. Don't worry about that. And there you can see a due to shareholder. So that is the dentist is using personal money throwing into the company to keep the company afloat. And so that's perhaps where the $45,000 of cash came from, at least $25,000 of it. Dr. Tim said, we might not make payroll. I better put in some more money. So he throws in some money there. Then you have debt. So we built it for $2 million. Now we owe 1.8. So we've started to pay principal last year. So that's a $200,000 cash flow cost. That principal payment doesn't show up on the income statement. So that's where your balance sheet is important. Your balance sheet, you're gauging what your liquidity is. So it's like, okay, we owe a lot of money and we've got share capital. That's just when I started the clinic or my PC, I bought my shares for $200 and we've got retained earnings of negative $699,550, which again is a mathematical number on what your assets are minus what your liabilities are. So we're in a negative deficit position of 700. Now that said, not all the assets are recorded. We built this clinic, so we had to assemble our team together, the people working in it, and we've had to gain patients. We've gained 4,200. That goodwill, which when you buy a practice, that's usually the most expensive thing you pay for is goodwill, that isn't reflected on here. So I'm not saying this clinic is worth negative $700,000. This clinic has an assets less hard liabilities of negative $700,000 and some liquidity problems. That's what I see on this balance sheet.
Okay. I'm glad that you pointed that out, because as you were going through that, like my stress levels just get like higher and higher and higher. And I know this is a fake sheet, but it still freaks me out. I don't like seeing it. I don't even want to think about it, because I just think now my brain automatically goes into how do I fix this, right? Which is exactly why we're here. So let's look at ways we can fix this, or ways that we can improve this operationally, with support services, whatever we can do. And I think part of that will go step by step, and we'll go through the revenues to start. So we can see that the dental service fees are, it's really tiny, $650,000, give or take. Hygiene is 290, I believe. So we're at like a 77% production for dentistry and a 23% production for hygiene. And we kind of like revisited that a little bit there, but I think there's some things in there, after, if you're saying 4,200 patient base, personally me right off the bat, I could think we could probably boost a bit more into hygiene and kind of look into that. And I see Justin shaking his head. I think he's probably thinking there's probably lots of things there that can be done. Justin, what off the bat would be if you could just name like 3 or 4 things, what would be the first things that you would look at, just realizing those numbers?
I mean, 4,200 active patients is awesome. If I saw, like, that's a great active patient base. I don't know if we ever talked about how many actual dentists or hygienists or chairs or whatnot we have at the practice, but start off with just how many of those patients are doing unscheduled for hygiene. Start with that base of patients, and that's now a funnel that we need to drive a whole bunch of actions at about getting those patients into the practice, or getting them inactivated if they're patients that we don't really feel like are coming back, or they've moved away, just so we get a more accurate active patient number. But first, just get a sense of how many of those are doing unscheduled. A lot of practices, to answer that, it starts with, I've got to go through a lot of exercise to clean up the continuing care information in my practice management software. And that needs to be done, because that's such an important metric to start with. It's just knowing what is your doing unscheduled percentage of your active patients. From there, there's a lot of things that you can do. You can use Care Crew. You can, really just, it's about getting a playbook now with your staff to get those patients in the door and to get them scheduled. And there's a lot of different activities. It requires a lot of outreach, requires definitely a blended approach, and not just doing robotic calls and having one person that's been doing it for the last 30 years, just constantly picking up the phone and hitting people's voicemails. Because, people can really bash their head against the wall trying to get those patients in the door, but there's definitely needing to be a blended approach of different touch points and way of reaching a patient to get them back into the practice.
Yeah. And I think operationally, just working in clinics every day and calling patients and doing recall systems, is just working through that and just constantly connecting with your patients more than just once. And I feel like a lot of people are like, I called that patient 3 months ago. Well, that's great, but 3 months is a long time. And me as a person, I literally get a text. I don't even remember who texted me the next day. So like, if I don't respond to it right away, if I don't action on it, like, it just sits in my text and gets fed down into the bottom of my text pile, which I might not ever see or might not ever engage with again. Right. And so I think people are super conscious of not, spamming people, which is super good. But I think there's a lot of opportunity in reaching out more frequently than we typically would think in that situation. And for me, I like to connect with them through email, through text, through phone, and until I reach them, because not everyone in that situation is going to answer or respond to them. Not everyone responds to email, not everyone responds to text, and not
sometimes
it's
postcards, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes, depending on your area of what might work for your patients, but the idea is to diversify your touch points and decide how frequent do you want to be. 4,200 active patients. Let's just say they had 25% of their patients doing on schedule, which is typically what you see in a lot of GPs. So having about 1,000 patients that could technically come in tomorrow for their hygiene appointments, that's a lot of opportunity that we could get in the door. And so I would definitely lean towards, for this practice, being aggressive. Let's get at least one touch point a month, right? Let's not wait every 3 months to reach out to a patient. Let's start once a month. And then based on that, now we've built a workflow for the practice. We need to make sure that the staff are actually following up with that. Are they actually making their contacts that they have to make? Or is your, whatever software system we're using in the practice, is it actually getting the right reach of those patients?
I got a question for you, Justin. I got a text message the other day, actually, from Care Crew, from my dentist, telling me that
nice.
that I hadn't been back to the dentist since COVID started. What percentage would you say right now are you seeing with your clients, depending on what province, have not gone back to the dentist since, have not visited the dentist since COVID started?
So patients that have actually, since COVID started, just taken a hiatus totally from coming into the practice.
Too scared to enter because they're afraid of getting COVID. Yeah.
I feel like it's hard to put a number on it. I mean, I feel like it's a very small percentage. I want to say, well, I shouldn't say too small. It's probably in that 5%, but I could be way off if anybody wants to correct me.
No, I would say you're probably pretty close. Like I would say it's not a huge amount of people are scared to go to the dental clinic. I think during COVID, the ADA&C, Canadian Dental Association, and the hygiene associations, once they all kind of figured out their stuff and their protocols, did a really good job of saying how safe it was. And I think in general, like marketing, like it was crazy. Like I felt like everything on social media, because I follow so many dental pages, obviously. But it was like, we're safe, we're wearing all our PPE. And I think they did a tremendous job. So I feel like the faux pas about going into a dental clinic was squashed quite fast. And I don't feel like it's a huge amount of patients that
but not for all practices, right? Like there's some, like what you're referencing, Mike, even when you say 5%, you really, over the grand scheme of things over the year, that's a big hit. And the practices that really, I would say, even succeeded during COVID are ones that were just really communicative with their patients. They were really, they've got the safety videos going up. They're walking the patients through what's actually happening at the practice. They're constantly reaching out, telling about how they've adapted to the protocols. The ones that have done that and really got in front of patients and really, led the charge that they were safe. I mean, those are the practices that aren't dealing with empty hygiene schedules right now. The ones that were super quiet are now putting their hands up like, COVID totally ruined my practice.
Yeah, Justin, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's absolutely the case. And you would be amazed at the amount of research that went into checking into COVID, the difference between aerosols and water droplets and transmission. And, my clients alone did some incredible research, found out some incredible information. The ones that passed along are laughing. The ones that didn't, you're exactly right. Those are the ones that are sitting around going, geez, I've had tons of cancellations and I don't know why it is. Right. So there was a tremendous opportunity for clients to get in front of their patients and make sure they knew that it was very safe to go to the dentist.
Maybe Vic, if you could chime in a little bit during just the marketing and stuff that was happening during that time. Like, did you see, I seen what I seen, but like, what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, it turns out that everyone the dental community didn't give social media maybe its due that it was deserved up and kind of till that time. Then you kind of really see the power of it, not only just from like follow us and like us, but from a PR perspective. Like like Justin was saying, like a touch point. It's a great touch point. People check updates on social media for when they're like, oh, I wonder what's going on, like at my name of business. They go to social media to find out what's the most current relevant information pertaining to that business. So dental is no exception. And so, yeah, during that time we did, obviously it was just insane. Everything was chaos. So we shut down marketing budgets across the board because they didn't want to pay for ad spend for patients that were not going to have a clinic to come to, right? So, which is fine. And then we did email blasts, and then all complimentary, because COVID was, well, now they had no revenue, so I wasn't going to go try and make a killing off of everybody's email blasts, but all COVID email blasts, every time there was an update, boom, we sent out an email blast. Or when we got everybody got the bomb dropped on like whatever it was, the Friday, the Thursday that we were opening up on Monday, and everyone was like, well, we're not opening on Monday because we don't have PPE or whatever, right? There was a place to be able to put that out to everybody, whether again, email or a social media post or whatever it might be. And then everyone's kind of on the same page. I think that's where a lot of people get their information now, whether you like it or not. It's extremely, the internet's a very real place at the moment.
Real, but not real.
I don't know. You know what? There's love. There's love. There's sex. There's politics. There's like everything. Like everything that's in life is distilled down on the internet in a variety of different ways. So it's pretty real.
It's true. It's true. Okay, so bringing it back then, I guess we'll just go to the next one, which is advertising and promotions. And I'm sure that Vic's probably drooling over this budget, $120,000. What could you do?
I am, except I naturally assume that it's probably not my budget, because that looks like 2 flyer drops, or a flyer drop every 2 months is what that looks like to me. Yeah. We don't know what's happening there, but yeah, I mean, clearly it's clearly overinflated by a considerable margin. And that's exactly what I would assume, is that, I mean, we're making this up, but I would assume that's like a $20,000 flyer drop every couple months, and just kind of wishing and hoping that patients come in through a tracking number or the limited metrics that you have there. So,
okay, like let's break this down a little bit further, because what is the return on investment, I guess, on doing like flyers versus doing social media versus doing like Google? Like, what are you seeing right now?
It depends. Everyone hates that answer, because ROI really is important. And with every clinic, we have a dashboard where like you can see kind of like what's going on, right? You could have the best marketing in the world, but if when that patient hits the front door of the clinic, if they can't keep them, then it didn't really matter that much. So the whole system has to work, of course. But generally speaking, what the advantage that digital marketing has over, like, let's say flyer drops, because to be clear, we don't do flyer drops. I just strictly operate in the digital sphere, so I don't have those numbers for you. You probably have better numbers than I do on that.
Well, I know what my perspective is on it, and we've done them. I've done them on the corporate level. I've done them in regular, and the return on investment is very low. Although, you know, it costs you, I think we did one for a small clinic that was struggling, and just for the neighborhood area, because there was a lot of transition, we thought, well, we'll just scoop up a few patients. I think we ended up getting 3 patients, which we know the lifetime of a patient value, right? And I think it ended up paying, if you considered the lifetime of that patient value, it paid for the thing. But like, how long do you have to keep those patients?
Over what time scale are we really?
Yeah, so that ROI is not as quick or as happy as I think doing social, or you know, even just handing things away in the clinic might get you better ROI than that. I feel like, or just better clinic care. I'd rather spend my money on having maybe another assistant so that everyone's happy in the workplace, like you said, to keep that patient happy, because everyone's happy. Well, and there's more to it than just like, let's say, like a specific call to action sort of thing, which like we can track. We can say, okay, we spent X number on ad spend, we got X number of patients back. But one of like the famous marketing questions, like, what is the value of the Nike swoosh, right? Like, what is the dollar value of that little check mark? You can't really put one on it. And yet almost any person in any part of the world, whether they're like, you know, on the plains of Africa, or like, everybody knows that check mark, right? So obviously we're not building Nike here, but brand recognition is extremely important. You know, new patients is one thing, but then retention is another thing. So when they see a post or something that comes up and it's like, oh, there's, you know, and you stay in the back of their head, just that little bit more, where there's consistent feel around things. That's super important and really, really, really undervalued, because generally speaking, well, like we're doing right now, we're looking at all the numbers, and the numbers are important. Do not get me wrong. Dentists tend to be an analytical people, right? Which is great. But some soft skills come into play here, right? Aesthetics and vibe, right? Feelings matter a lot, and how you feel about your dental clinic can be controlled.
right? And sometimes it gets overlooked a little bit, I think.
Well, and I think you're really onto that there, Vic, because just with my experience, even in the last, I mean, I wouldn't be employed if it just had to be worry about the numbers.
Yeah.
Right. People management is a huge proponent of that. And I feel like as we kind of like gone through the last, I would say the first year of COVID was fine. Like, I think everyone was kind of just on this like operational high, if you will, right? Like, we got this, we're going through, everything's gonna be fine. And the vaccines are going to roll out and this is all going to be great and blah, blah. And we're like, good. And then I think what happened was things started to like slip because people were getting tired and burnt out. And then operationally things started to slip and then people were getting frustrated. And I feel like dental leadership as a whole got grumpy, got really grumpy. And it's hard to be emotionally objective when you're frustrated.
And it's your baby that you're frustrated about, right? Like,
well, your livelihood
child.
too.
Yeah, right. So no, it's totally fair, and I think you're totally right. But I think if you, and I'm talking about social media, but you know, the whole thing works together. Whether it's search engine optimization, having a website with a good funnel, like all these different things matter. But you know, that intangible component is really valuable, and not even just from a patient side. You know, so I had a client just last week or a week and a half ago, got an associate strictly through Instagram. Right. So like, what's the value of an associate to a clinic? How do you put, I mean, I'm sure someone here has a number on that. I don't, but it's considerable, not even just dollar wise, but heartache and stomach lining for that, you know, she's a sole practitioner, for her to be able to take a step back, maybe have a day off every now and then. Like that has value, perhaps not a dollar value, but value nonetheless. And that associate found her through social media and liked the feel of the clinic, of everything that was kind of coming through, because authenticity is a real big, point here that I think gets overlooked too. And so she slid into her DMs like a creepy Chad. And I don't know if anyone understands the Chad reference, but so this associate slid into her DMs, and and now they're working together as of this Monday, this week. And beautiful, like what a beautiful case study in how really paying attention to your online presence can be beneficial to the clinic and the staff. And that, you know, and using that anecdote of an associate, but that can translate to a hygienist, front end, RDA, like whatever you need. You know, people will be drawn in like a magnet, and the people that you want that are a culture fit, not just a number, like, yeah, okay, we got this person in here. You know, I know a lot of the DSOs maybe function a little more that way, but for the kind of like ma and pa shop, culture fit's huge, because you've got 4 people working in the clinic. Number 5 better fit in, right?
Yeah. And I think too that like the difference too between a corporate social media page and a mom and pop social run media page is dramatic differences. You get less cookie cutter type of posts, because they're like naturally more organic and naturally more engaged. And even just the social media pages that I run for some of my clinics, and I just post fun things that are happening in the clinic a lot more frequently. And we get a ton of engagement because it's real dental. We're still geeking out dental wise. Like, it's still weird because, like, let's be real, dental's like a little bit, I think you have to be a little off kilter to be in dental, and that's why I love it. And so I feel
you're crazy matches their crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I found my people. It's my tribe. But yeah, essentially, you know, you see those things and you get a lot of engagement, and that engagement then helps feed into the clinic and the type of people you're getting, because, you know, those algorithms in social media are insane. And they like, I mean, even just like we all know your phone listens to you, right? Like, it listens to you, and then all of a sudden it starts popping up on your social media and stuff like that for ads. But like, so if you're running those campaigns and you're talking about dental a lot. I mean, like my entire ad campaigns that show up on me is all dental, because that's all I talk about. I clearly have no life. And so then basically that's it though, right? Like, and so if someone's interested in like, oh, you're big into Star Wars at your clinic and you post things about Star Wars, and then all of a sudden someone posts something in Star Wars, and then you run an ad campaign and it shows up on your social media, it's like, oh, look at this cool clinic. They're not very far from me and they're huge Star Wars fans. And that seed gets planted, and that seed gets planted, and that seed gets planted until eventually you have a bunch of plants growing and you're like, oh crap, like that, I want to go to that clinic. My dentist is retiring, I'm going to go find another clinic.
Because like the chances of someone seeing an Instagram post and being like, wow, that is the most beautiful Instagram post I've ever seen, I'm going to go book an appointment at that clinic, is pretty much zero. Right? Like that's probably not going to, I mean, it might, I'm not going to, it's possible, but unlikely. What you're doing is just building kind of this background idling culture where you're just kind of like, hey, we're here, and like it's fun to be here. And then when the need arises, like as much as and I mean, Justin can say like care group, where you can actually like reach out and grab someone and pull them in. Dentistry is inherently reactionary, and people book an appointment when they need one, when they need one right now, right? And so all these technologies and stuff can help, but that part will always be there, that emergency side, or not even necessarily emergency, but it's like, okay, I've sloughed off the last couple texts, I should probably, so if care crew's texting, they're seeing a social media post, they get an email blast every month. None of these are super, except for maybe like the email blast and the text, but people don't mind the text from like a doctor, right? But all these things are sort of passive and not super like salesy, pushy, in your face, the car dealership calling you like, hey, I've got a great offer on your car. It's not that. It's just background buzz.
Yeah, exactly.
Vic, having the best marketing playbook or the general one, I know that's definitely a hard question to answer, but in a specific scenario, like an established GP that actually wants to grow, I'm sure you've come across a few of those. What typically is the most underutilized digital asset or digital channel that you see right off the bat that you want to go ahead and get started with them? It's
almost always a bad website. Or an underperforming website. Maybe it's not bad. It's just not, it just looks like a dental website.
What do you consider an underperforming website? That's what I want to know, because I feel like in my mind, I see dental dentists that have a WordPress site.
Yep.
That have their
Stock
about
photos.
me, their contact, and then a bunch of, we do root canals, bridges, crowns, implants, blah, 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 all on a one page. And then that's it. So like would you consider that an underperforming website?
Don't forget the smiling white family on the front.
That too.
Where they're all like sitting in a field with a perfect life.
100%.
I mean, there's a whole lot to it. One, the treatment page is really great. Like it's important for people to know what you do, but people kind of get it. There's a small percentage of people who are going to want to really dig into what you do, and that's fine. You can have that available for them, but it shouldn't be front and center. You need to give them an emotional experience out the gate. Think about like when you're selling a house, what do they say? The first 30 seconds, someone buying a house has already made a decision of whether or not they want to buy it. The exact same thing happens on your website. It's an extension of your clinic. So when they land on that homepage, it should be, right? Like that, this doesn't look like a dental website. Something that is engaging and within the first 10 seconds gives them an experience of what it's like to come to the clinic. So video on the homepage, huge, clearly identifiable calls to action on the beginning, the things that people are going to want to do, like request an appointment, call now, directions, whatever it might be. Those are the big ones. And then once we have the website up and running, we have a heat map and we can see what people are clicking on, what's working and what's not, where they're spending the most time on the page. So it's not just all touchy-feely soft. There's some math behind
it. Well, and strategy. I think there's a lot of strategy, right? And I feel like it adapts and you have to adapt with it because the market and okay, so bear with me. I watched Gary Vee. I watch a lot of Gary Vee because I find him wildly entertaining. The millennial in me loves him. But I feel like Tom's like, who's Gary Vee? So he always says the market never lies. right? And
Totally.
so adapting to that market is something continual that we need to like focus on, I think, a lot of the time, and just being adaptable in our perspective as well.
I think also too, generally speaking, and I mean, I'm maybe reaching past my profession here, but you know, dentistry's had it pretty good and not had to adapt for a long time up until recently. It's kind of like I made this reference earlier on Bob's podcast, but you know, you've watched Batman, the trilogy, Christopher Nolan trilogy, where he's fighting Bane on the catwalk, and like the water's pouring down, and Bane's just like kicking the crap out of him, and he's like, victory has defeated you, right? Because Batman got lazy because he's always winning. He's just like he's Batman. He's always winning, and then he comes up against an adversary that is better than him, and all of a sudden he's out of his depth, right? And clinics to a degree have kind of gone through this, especially with COVID. It really, you know, showed a lot of gaps that you might have had, because it was good. Patients were coming in, things were working. You didn't have to have a nice polished website or a really good recall system or anything like that, because everything was just kind of business as usual. And now all of a sudden you got some real big problem in your face where it's like, okay, yeah, we gotta sharpen the axe.
Well, and I think it just, like you said, it just kind of was a spotlight was shone on some of the errors, like the things that needed to be a little bit more addressed. But yeah, okay, that's awesome.
That was way too much on on that one line item, but
no, it was good. It was good because I feel like you know what, like as we go through this, it's just it's important to acknowledge though that like that's a part of dentistry that hasn't really been addressed a lot of, and there is a lot of restrictions on it, which is why people are very hesitant to kind of engage a lot in the marketing. And I think going with marketing firms that know dentistry, because I know like I know in my area, and I know in like just obviously being in dental for a while, there's a lot of people who market, and it's there, I would consider maybe a gray area, but like there's a lot of people marketing outside the gray area, more into the black area of what they should be doing according to our regulations and guidelines. But if that just happens when you trust someone in the marketing team that doesn't know all the rules and regulations. And I think getting comfortable with a marketing person, it's going to help you kind of stay within your budget guidelines, stay within your idea, vision, and scope of what we're allowed to do is going to just totally benefit your practice long-term, because
and there's that gray area, like, so everyone has a different level of comfortability for like how far they want to approach that gray area. Some, you know, owners would be like, no, we're staying far and away, don't want to be on the radar. And we're, you know, whereas others are like, let's just, let's see if we get a hand slap and then we'll back off. Right. So everybody's got a different level of comfortability when it comes to that. But exactly. And I think that's essentially up to the practice owner to decide. But I feel like, you know, working with someone who gets dental, because again, it's a niche market. It's not the same as working in other fields of practice. It's highly regulated, and it's, I mean, for good reason. We want to protect the sanctity of the dentistry in general, but it's just a bit trickier than you know, starting up an Instagram account and posting whatever you want on it. So, well, generally speaking, that's way too much money to spend on marketing, as much as I would love for that to be true. That is an overinflated number that could be whittled down to less of a shotgun approach and more of a sniper approach with not too much trouble.
Yeah, and just execute where it needs to be done. And you know what, when your production goes up, then that percentage goes down, right? And so then it's fine as long as you're getting that return on investment. Yeah,
or you scale up proportionally and continue the growth. If that's the fuel that's feeding the fire, then great. Maybe it isn't, but if it is, let's play and find out.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Okay, so then we can go down into dental supplies, which I think Tom kind of just injected a bunch of things on there as well, as far as like what goes into that number, like how that number kind of affects everything around it. And I think we went into like lab costs were going in that number. What are the top three things? I think, Tom, we'll just reiterate them really quick.
I'll back up one. I'll go into amortization of tangible assets and put Jamie on the spot.
Okay.
So this,
okay, let's do it. I like this.
Dr. Watley built an 8 operatory clinic in a great location out of the gate. 8 ops, $2 million. Jamie, what is the likelihood that you will not get any pushback from me if you advise somebody to do that?
Well, that was going to be my first response, is I wasn't going to weigh in on this financial statement because it wouldn't have existed if I would have got to this guy early on.
Yeah.
But
Some rep had a very good Christmas, but you've got this doctor in a very difficult spot.
So, I mean, the goal of my relationship with Dr. Tim Watley would be that I would be his sales advisor for a long time. And I can tell you that if this P&L and this spend existed, that would not happen. I would not be his sales rep for a long time. I would either get fired or I would be finding somebody to buy this practice out of receivership. So there would be two roads that I could go down there. So first and foremost, you're absolutely right, Tom. The value of a supply rep now and a dental dealer and an equipment dealer is to do proper, well-vetted forecasts on business plans, pro formas, cash flow projections, pardon me. You know, if we did that and reasonably came up with a number, then the 8 operatories would have never been purchased. There would have been a plan to build for 8 operatories and 3 operatories would have been purchased, right? And we would have scaled the business and added more equipment and more rooms as revenue grew. So that's first and foremost, number one. Number two on that is, you know, Theresa, you pointed to dental supplies. For a long time, I used to only really be able to influence one line item on this P&L, and that was dental supplies. And, you know, as we've expanded our reach, our knowledge, our resources, you know, there's probably 6 or 7 that now, you know, we can have a positive impact on. So, you know, bank charges and fees, you know, we have relationships now where we can limit expenses on credit card charges and things like that. We pass that along to clients. We talk about marketing spend. Vic, one thing I really like about working with you guys is there's measurable successes. Where is our marketing spend going? Is it working? You know, Vic can not only tell us how many new patients we got from a certain marketing campaign, then Justin can tell us what dollar value that resulted in from that marketing campaign. So the more information, the better. So there's a ton of things I'd weigh in on here. Number one, Tom, you're absolutely right, because I don't want you slashing my tires because I sold 8 operatories of equipment to Dr. Watley, who's a client of yours. As far as the dental supplies go, you know, to answer Tom's question for you, I see it all the time. There is small equipment put in there. There is repairs and maintenance. There is panoramic x-rays. There's all sorts of stuff that bookkeepers don't allocate properly. And for some, and sometimes for tax purposes, it's done that way, right? So, you know, we're not here to judge, but we're just here to make sure that you're not putting too much stock in a number that may not be accurate. A big thing is inventory, as you mentioned, Tom. If there's a 13 to 18% supply spend and there's, you know, $60,000 worth of product sitting on the shelves, well, that's not an accurate spend. Hate to tell you, you bought it, but you haven't used it, right? So there's a lot that goes into that analysis as well. So yeah, first and foremost, not too many operatories, sound business plan, good cash flow projections, and then hopefully we could limit some of the expenses on this financial statement.
I when Tom had went over the inventory, I put a big star beside, I wrote it down and put a big star beside it because he said not very many dentists ever do their year-end inventory. And I found that very interesting because I feel like if you have your dental supplies under control, as far as like knowing what's going in and what's going out, it's super easy to manage. If you have a system in place for that, right? And some of the clinics I worked with, we did have because we didn't have a lot of storage room. And so you have to be aware of what's coming in and coming out because you might run out of it and not have it for the patient that's showing up for the day. And believe me, that's happened before, because I don't think a dental practice has ever ran and not have that happen before, where you had to cancel a patient because you didn't have what you needed. But I feel like being particularly aware of what is going on in that area is really smart, but it doesn't mean you need to micromanage the area. It just means you need to know what's coming in and coming out. And even during COVID, it was very interesting because as we were coming out of COVID, and at the time I was managing 6 practices, and we were being very tight on our supplies, obviously, because we didn't know what was happening, what was going. And I think every clinic went through that. We're not buying anything. Like Vic had said, we just kind of like shut it down and we're just being really clean and smart. And I think that's at that point was a really smart decision business wise. And so then the first thing I said to my teams was, you need to go pull everything out of the stock room and put it in your operatories, because we need to make sure that none of that stuff that we have that's going to expire is going to expire before we get a chance to use it when we open back up. And I think I don't want to buy anything. I want to make sure that we use all of our products before they expire, because I mean, lots of that stuff has shelf life, right? Like they can only sit for so long. And if you're not paying attention to it is, I think an easy way to help your dental supplies remain accurate and not to lose money in your dental supplies. You're using what you have, but just knowing what you have is a really effective way of keeping that dental supply budget within a reasonable amount, but also then it allows you to buy the things that you want to have in the clinic that are like, oh, you know what? This month I'm going to do 6 Cerex and I need to buy so many different blocks, but I need to buy them in multiple shades or whatever. I mean, it gives you the advantage of having the extra cash flow to do that because you've been smart about your dental supplies. And it doesn't mean you have to micromanage them. Like I said, you just need to be aware of what's coming in and what's coming out and putting someone in charge of that so that kind of stays manageable. Just like all parts of the practice, it just needs some attention.
And I would echo too, there's a lot of strategies that come down to lowering that supply spend and being a little bit more responsible. So I would echo the starting point that please work with your supply rep. We sit in meetings, the 11 of us in Edmonton, and we literally strategize, how can we feasibly lower client supply spend? Is there non-critical products that aren't staying in the mouth that we can use private brand label that's going to lower the cost on that? We all know nitrile gloves right now are 5 times what they used to cost. It's absolutely insane. And it's beyond any of our control. I wish I could control it because it would save me a lot of phone calls that I take on a day-to-day basis right now. But, in lieu of that, is there other areas that we can save on, right? So that's a really important point I want to hit is, again, I'll echo that your success as a practice is directly tied to our success as reps. And we want to do the best job we can for you guys when it comes to streamlining supply ordering, managing inventory, and lowering costs. So that's number one. Theresa, you made a really good point about stale dated product. We all love to bulk up at the trade shows and get the really cool deals and, the extra gift cards or iPads or whatever the manufacturers are doing at the time. But, we talk about wastage and, if you throw out even 2-3% of that product, all your savings and more has gone out the window, right? And now you're worried about managing inventory. You have staff taking entire days or half a day to put things away, efficiencies going out the window. So there's a healthy balance there too, right? So all things that I would be cognizant of. Your practice that ordered basically as you needed, and when the treatment was coming in the week after, that's a pretty cool system to get down because we have 30 days from the day of our statement that you need to pay our bill. So if you're done right, if you do this right, that product is in the mouth, it has made a difference, you have billed and collected for the treatment, and you haven't paid for it yet, right? So there's a pretty cool strategy when it comes to that if you can get your inventory management down to a science. And, I think not only will the dentist be happier with a little bit more cash flow, the staff will be less stressed about, making sure that they're getting product in on time and the right stuff. And yeah, it can be a pretty cool system if you get it dialed in.
Yeah, I think it goes hand in hand with salaries and wages though, because you have to have someone actively managing that. And it does require attention to be managed like that. You can have an entire team, depending on the size of your team, if you have just a 4-op clinic, you might be able to have just one person manage it. But when you have, let's say 8, 10, 12, 18 tops, that's beyond one person's capabilities. It's an entire team that goes into that. And you have to build an entire system on that just to make sure it goes smoothly.
Yeah, I agree. And that's where I would echo the statement to leverage us, right? Because I mean, this is something that we do day in and day out. Consider us a member of the team, right?
Yeah, that would
Because
help tremendous
you're
amount.
absolutely right. It's if you end up spending more on managing it than you do on the product, then you're no further ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So we can get down to salaries and wages because we kind of naturally went into that conversation. So salaries and wages, tell me all the things that we need to know about this, Tom.
Me? So
Well, I'm
salaries
just
and wages.
joking.
No,
I just want
that's
to
no
say,
problem.
essentially, give me a high level overview, I guess, of
High level overview.
of
So
what is
sure.
a healthy salary. And we kind of did this a little recap, but just like we did talk about the 25 to whatever to 35 and kind of the gap in between.
Sure. So this one's at 40.65%. So that is a very healthy spend. And so part of the case was what he did, and you can kind of see his business plan. So when the business plan came together, I know exactly what Dr. Watley was planning for. He's like, this is going to blow everyone out of the water. It's going to be amazing clinic. We're building to the max. I've been saving up for a long time. I've been an associate. We're going to spend lots of money on advertising. And that is going to generate new patients, which seems to be successful. Like on average, if they've got 4,200 active patients, they've been open for 3 years, they're getting 110, 120 new patients a month. That would be really strong in my view of when I hear what that statistic is. That's would usually be on the very high side. So they've been successful in getting patients in. Don't know if it's necessarily good bang for the buck, and that's where Vic would have to analyze that. But the salaries and wages, what he did is he's attracted a great team, and they do a high standard of care. However, to attract the great team, he's obviously had to pay something for that, and the revenue is not quite there yet. So perhaps that's the strategy of the staffing issue. Like, we have, and on business plans, when you send those into the bank, and it's kind of a dance you do with the bank. Banks don't usually like to see heavy salary commitments out of the gate. If in your business plan, if you're saying, I'm going to open the doors, I'm not going to do my own hygiene at all, I'm going to hire a hygienist, and I'm going to hire a full-time office manager, full-time receptionist, and 2 RDAs out of the hop. Like, okay, that's a big machine that you're going at right away. Banks usually like to see, I'll do my own hygiene for a little while, and then maybe bring one on part-time-ish, and then full-time by 1.5 years, 2. So I can, in my mind, when I was kind of just finding the case, it's like, there are dentists out there like that. They have a very large vision, but they haven't been able to execute operationally. So I would say the salaries and wages is really high. He probably plucked some very experienced and very, very good people. But the revenue hasn't been able to follow. They might be great hygienists, but maybe there's something going on in treatment coordination or something like that that's not effective. The problem in this practice seems to be not necessarily new patient flow. It was built really big, and it's a big machine, but it's not full enough. So it's something is happening operationally that isn't working. And so salaries and wages, should you have bridged that gap with some temporary staffing, that would have probably locked you into less monthly commitment. Well, not probably, it would have locked you into less monthly commitment. It also wouldn't have you liable for severances, and you also don't have all of the other soft costs that go along with full-time employment. So it's high. Is it a number that I haven't seen before in a new startup? Nope. Sometimes it's a really high number. Well, I don't. I see this. I see the financial statements. I see what happens. Sometimes I get reporting on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, depending on what the dentist engages us to do, or what sometimes we'll work with a really good bookkeeper or controller person to see it. But I'll see it after the fact. Like usually this year end is June 30th. Well, I'm probably going over this with them sometime in September or sometimes October. So this has already happened, 6, 7, 8
not very
a year.
Proactive then.
Yeah, it's behind, so you don't see it. And so paying attention to your salary and wages and what you're committing to out of the hop, and in this case, is really important. And one time I was doing a deal with a very seasoned business person, and it wasn't in dentistry. And this CEO had bought and sold lots of businesses, and he was targeting my client, and he was talking and assessing it. And he was like, "Oh, well, you're kind of in the puke zone, aren't you? You're in the zone where in order to grow to the next level, you need a whole bunch more people. You need another this and another that and another whatever. And that means when you're adding those people and spending money to train them, and sometimes you'll hire the wrong person and then you train that person, hire a person, like you don't have the cash flow that you're used to having because you're trying to punch through to get to that next level of structure. So what I would expect to see based on the very simple case would be he's hired some pretty amazing people, perhaps at the wrong time, perhaps a little bit too early.
Yeah, and that's essentially what I would see. And to correct this issue personally, and I could be totally wrong because that's totally potential for this, but I feel like it can, well, and just like anything on the sheet can be changed by adding production. So the higher the production, then the lower the staff costs. And so I immediately go to, well, if we have 4,200 patients and our hygiene program's only at 23%, I might be able to dump some energy into the hygiene program, or maybe turn one of those highly paid staff into assisting into the hygiene. Instead of doing what they're doing in the back end, not making money, I can put them into a position where they are going to put money into the schedule or put production into the schedule. And then when that goes, I think, Mike, you would probably have a lot of solutions to come in once we're able to kind of gain some momentum in the production, to then look at that punch through moment like Tom was talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Tom mentioned, that's where you would utilize temps with to make that bridge to full time. We've talked a lot about temp, but we also provide permanent staffing solutions as well. So any office that is looking for permanent staff, we can do that search out of the gate. But what we find is sometimes we have a temp and we'll convert them to a permanent staff member as well, right?
Well, yeah, that's kind of not a bad idea. And I know that other fields do that, like, because I've worked in multiple areas of like demographics of work, but like, I just feel like dentistry doesn't really do that temp to transition into the role. And I know, excuse me, and I know that like office people do it, whatever, but I feel like that isn't really something that gets tapped into too much, or it's something maybe we don't think about, is turning someone in from a temp into that role. We just usually are like, oh, I'll temp them in and out or whatever. The thing that I guess that we could talk about too is potentially, like, as we raise our production and drop our staff costs and we can get into that more of a permanent position, we can work with that agency that's helping out, whether it be workforce or whoever, or work with the team to see if we can bring on more people and drive a goal towards bringing up the production so that staff cost goes down. Because I know that we're getting out of COVID too, and just working through staff costs, people are going to start to ask for raises now. And I feel like that conversation is going to start coming, because I know lots of people, dental clinics had kind of just said, we're not doing that during COVID, which is fine. And we all got it. Like, I think everyone had a good understanding of that. But then if we're looking at our staff costs are high, then kind of restructuring, and some clinics did totally restructure coming out of COVID. I know we did. We only brought back minimal crew, and we built that up, and then brought back more people and built that up and brought back more people. And so I have a really good understanding of how to build a clinic, because we were doing that the entire time coming out of COVID, just inch by inch building out. And like, we would have those punch through moments where everyone's going crazy, just trying to do what we could do until we could, have the production to support bringing on another person. So we didn't have the luxury of bringing in a temp. We literally had to bring back someone that we had off of CERB, which was like create like this crazy dynamic, because they were getting paid more to stay at home than they were to coming to work. And we had to like balance that, because they couldn't work at, there was all that stuff that went into it. And I think if we had that kind of opportunity to fill in with temps during that time in my life, probably would have been 100% easier. But we were trying to bring people back full time and into their spots where they had, and it caused for a lot of stress. And I think not every dental clinic ran it as tight as we did, but we were definitely trying our best to run a really clean, a really lean staff cost, which causes, its own anxiety and stress too.
Yeah, we definitely saw that as well. I mean, a lot of our clients that were before COVID, they said, listen, we've got to take care of our people first, right? We got to give them the hours before we go there. And I get it. Touching on the staff cost component, every province that we're in, there's a unique challenge. In Alberta, the wages are the highest in the country, like without a doubt, for hygienists and dental assistants. There's nowhere else in Canada that I've seen the wages that I see in Alberta. And one thing that again, speaking on the staffing agency side, that I see as a problem that I think the people on here that are listening should be really, really aware of is that we're the only agency right now in Canada that directly employ the people we send, which is how temp staffing is supposed to happen. Every other staffing agency out there is what I call a basement agency. It's one person in their basement that's, pretending to run a staffing agency. What they're really doing is they're just dropping someone off at your door, and then you have to deal with it. And one of those things you have to deal with is their wage. And they are dictating, these dental offices are allowing them to dictate their wages. And in almost all cases, they're inflating the wages. So if the rate for hygienists in Alberta is, say, $55, we're regularly hearing that temps are getting paid $65 an hour. And, an office has got to, number one, I just pray that offices stop allowing this to happen, because it's artificially pushing up the wages and your staff costs, which we're talking about right now. And it's creating a resentment with all of the other people in your office. When, your other three hygienists find out that you just paid some temp $10 an hour more, what are they going to do, in the months to come? They're going to ask for a raise, and everything starts getting pushed up. So, I call it hostage pay. Everybody has to stop allowing this practice to happen. With us, we control the wages, we pay fair market value. So we can help keep those staff costs in check.
Yeah, I found that it was an interesting dynamic swing coming out of COVID. We went through the hygiene swing where hygiene wages, everyone's like, oh, we're dropping hygiene wages. And then all of a sudden we couldn't get enough hygienists. So then hygiene wages went up, and we're bringing people on way higher than we normally typically would, because dentists were desperate to get the hygiene going, to get the business back up and running. And then we've seen that again with RDAs now, and the RDAs have really leveraged themselves like never before, because their wages were fairly reasonable for a long time. And now, you're seeing where they're quitting at the places that they've worked for so long, because they can go next door and someone's going to pay them, I'm talking $5 or $6 more an hour. And it was interesting because I had an experience last week, and I went in and they were talking to this RDA, and they wanted to bring them onto the clinic, and they asked me, and I said, oh, okay. I was like, oh, how much does she want an hour? And they said $31. And I was like, oh, so she's been out for a while. And they said, oh yeah, like 18 months. And I just about threw up, and I was like, 18 months. I'm like, and then I asked the question, I said, okay, well, what kind of experience does she have then? like, 18 months, but maybe was a receptionist for the last 5 years, and she said, and they said, well, I mean, she was chairside for 5 years until she realized she needed to get a license to be chairside. And I was just like, what? So now you have someone that's getting paid $31 an hour that worked out of scope for 5 years. And, so like that we're in this kind of weird dynamic again where, you know, staff costs are increasing and increasing because the leverage is there and there's no RDAs to fill the spots. So then dentists get desperate and dentists just pay, or the practice owners, I'm gonna say dentists, the practice owners just pay because they need a body in there. They need someone to help them do their job so they can, you know, make their clinic run. And I see it, you know, it kind of goes through these waves and it's different people. I don't know if it ever really hit reception yet, but I feel like maybe that turn's going to come soon, because dental receptionists do get paid a lot of money as well. In some clinics, I feel like they get paid way too much money, and in other clinics, I think they don't get paid enough. But yeah, like it's just the staff costs, I feel like are always something that are difficult to manage. And you don't want to, and it's tricky too, because you don't want to like drop the level of patient care while you're managing these staff costs. So we're just seeing that happen a lot more, and it's operationally tricky to manage. And I know that those questions soon are going to come for raises and all that stuff, and working through the verbiage of dealing with that. But if people are going to quit and go next door, then you have to be prepared for that too, because if your staff costs don't support it, you know, you have to look at your production and revenue to make sure that, you know, if you need to bring in another person, what that looks like. And I think that's, like Tom said, these numbers tend to be very retroactive, and we need to be a little bit more proactive about them. And I think there's probably some tools out there. I know I've had a really good friend of mine create a tool for me so I can actively see like what the staff costs are and every month, and it just, this is the hours that are being put in, and it tells me the, you know, general idea of what the staff costs are, so that I can keep an eye on it and know, okay, well, our production dropped, you know, because this clinic was shut down for 2 weeks because the, you know, the team was close contact, right? And so then production takes a hit, and now we're looking at our staff costs. Well, you know, do we pay for them to be here? You know, some could work, some don't work. There's all that stuff that kind of plays into that too.
Yeah, I know from my experience too, and Theresa, you probably see this even more so than I do, but there's not a lot of benchmarks or measuring tools in dental, right? As far as the business goes. In any other business, you know, I get benchmarked. I have budgets that I need to hit every year. And that's just a very common thing in the business world. And it's very uncommon in dental. I feel like it's almost like just a series of fires that we have to put out in a day because things get chaotic and patients cancel and the day falls apart, and, you know, billings don't go through to insurance companies, so on and so forth. But, you know, part of your exercise where you track your, you know, KPIs, Justin's got an entire software program that does it for us, which is of huge, huge value. It allows us to set some benchmarks. It allows us to set a baseline of comparison, because, you know, the practice managers and the clinic owners on the call, how often, you know, does a staff member come and you find a mistake and you go, how did you make this mistake again? Like you made this mistake again. I told you last week, don't make this mistake. You made it again. Well, is there anything guiding that staff member? Do they have a job description? Do they know that in situations like this is their options to deal with those issues? To be honest with you, in most cases, I would say the answer is no, they don't. Right. So, you know, we've left these employees up to their own devices to try to figure out solutions. And they're just trying to do what's best for the clinic and the patient and, you know, the dentist. And they're balancing a lot of, you know, win, lose situations. And if we don't have a baseline for them to deviate to, then I think putting the expectation that they're going to make the right choice every time is unfair. Right, Theresa? I mean, I think that's what I really like about your program is, you know, you put things in place that are benchmarks, right? That are baselines, so that there's deliverables every single week, month, year. And if somebody deviates from something, it's okay, because we just go back to the system. We just go back to the process. And
well,
the
process
process will guide us through, right?
It's interesting too, because I feel like whenever I end up going into the clinic, I always do like the rounds and talk to the staff members and kind of just get a feel for what's going on in the clinic. And the first thing I say is, oh, like, how are things going? and they're just like, well, I'm stressed, or this is happening, well, you know, and those first days I go into the clinic actually are really hard days for me, because I just feel like I'm the garbage man, and I just get like dumped on, and all this emotion and drama and frustration. And it just literally, like, I come home and my husband's just like, okay, you need to just like go check out, go for a walk, go to your room, just like go watch TV, just like veg for the day, because it's hard, because I'm really try to have a lot of empathy for dentists, because they don't have time in a day to do the management. They don't have time in the day to like get on with all this other stuff. They are doing dentistry, and they're literally the people that are making the money to pay the bills of everything else that's happening in the clinic. And then hopefully at the end of the day, take stuff home. And I had the luxury of working with some really terrific dentists when I first started in dentistry, and because they were close friends of mine, I got to see that, like all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into that, and I got like a lot of education on the back end of things, just because, like, you know, he'd be like, oh, this is happening, and this is happening, I need to work on this, and this is, you know, and so I constantly am, oh, okay, well, I need to do that, and to support that mission, right? But he was constantly giving me the mission, the vision, the deliverables. Like, I had deliverables every week, and he wasn't like a strict person, and Tom knows him, so you know, he's not like a super strict guy. He's actually like really laid back. But you know, he always say, okay, well, this is where I want to see the numbers this week. And like, okay, this is before CareCo, because I'm old, and this is before anything digital came out, where I literally had to dig into Dentrix, pull up analytics, figure out what those analytics mean. I knew nothing about dental in the beginning. So I like trying to figure out dentistry, what, you know, trying to achieve these goals and those benchmarks. But yeah, like you said, they didn't, like, no one has them. So then you feel like you have to make them up, and you're trying to guess. And part of why I ended up where I am today is because I just found it so freaking annoying that the information is not there. It's not easy to get. No one talks about it, because dentists don't talk to each other, because heaven forbid their person next door finds out that maybe their hygiene program isn't quite as perfect as it looks on social media. And then social media didn't even exist then. So, you know, but like, that's just it, right? It's a very silo kind of business. And so they don't focus on the business, because it just, you don't need to. For a long, long time, like Vic said, you didn't need to. It just kind of ran itself. You get the right people in there, it runs itself. And to be fair, that's still pretty true. You can get the right people in there, and it can run itself if you have the right people, but it can run very efficiently if you have someone managing that and helping you reach those goals, looking over your numbers. And I think Tom and I talk about it all the time, you know, about taking on maybe some clients he likes to take on, and some clients are harder because like the books aren't in order, and they don't know what the numbers mean, and they don't know what those KPIs, how to interpret them. And then you have to work with someone in the clinic to like drive that business forward. And as much as he wants to help, he's restricted in how much he can help. Same goes for anybody else that's influenced in clinic. If you don't have someone actively managing that practice, and I use the word actively managing, because I think you can have a manager, but like literally actively managing, keeping an eye on things, making sure that the people are engaged, making sure that all of the kind of systems are in place, so that when you come out of COVID, or when you come out of these tougher times, your clinic can still run, just like Justin had mentioned before. Like, you can't run a clinic, or the clinics that are doing well, or were doing well before COVID, are doing well now because they took their downtime to kind of like revamp themselves, and are doing really well now. But the ones that didn't, and just assumed it would just be like, go, go, go. It was go, go, go. But now it's not go, 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 because they don't have the systems in place, and they didn't talk to their staff about, you know what, in the future, if things drop down, I might have to cut your hours a little bit here, or this is just a temporary position. You know, like this is a casual position. We're bringing you here, we're bringing you on, or maybe bringing someone in a temp position to like manage those staff costs, or, you know, boosting your marketing and communications. Like all of those things play into the dynamic of an overall clinic view. And if you don't have someone helping you with that, and you're the dentist and you're expected to spend, you know, 8 hours in the dental chair, and then go home and spend 5 hours doing the business part of your practice, I mean, it's near impossible. You just can't do it anymore, but it still needs to get done. The work doesn't go away. So
one of the motivating factors or factors for the change in the, where we're at today, when we're speaking to, compared to 10 years ago, how different things are now, is just the existence of outside capital in this market and just the massive influx of private equity money. We've got this big acquisitions race. It's just, you have to be able to operate yourself as a very well-run, oiled machine, established business that has those benchmarks, has those monthly goals in place. You've got to really run a tight ship, because if not, you're going to get the market's going to compete you out if you got all their practices opening up around you, or when you're looking to step aside or to retire, you're trying to sell your practice amongst a very competitive market. I mean, we're going through a lot of rapid consolidation, a lot of rapid change, as we can see all the new services like, Care Crew being one of them. There's a reason we got into the dental market. There's a lot of change, and it's all being driven by this massive influx of outside capital that's happening in dental.
Yeah, I think the Dr. Watley example is kind of a microcosm on a 2-year level of exactly what's gone on in dental. I mean, you look at a clinic who's been open for 2 years with 4,200 active patients, that's 175 a month. And they're probably just scrambling to get people in, get the treatment they need. Nobody's pre-appointing, they don't have appointments before they leave. And then all of a sudden you have a waterfall of issues that fall from that, where, Sally at the front, who's not only responsible for scheduling, she's also responsible for bookkeeping and, ordering front office supplies from Staples and letting the cleaner in on the weekend, and all the stuff that Sally has to do, is now responsible for calling, Justin, what would you feasibly say, 70% of that patient base who's not appointed, right? If we just put a simple solution in place, like, please, hygienists, try not to let the patient leave without their next appointment. And if, 1 or 2 a day slip by, now Sally only has to make 30 to 60 calls in 6 months rather than, 1,400. So it's just a matter of getting some fundamental things in place. And, Theresa, I've seen you do that and have instant success with doing that. Justin, I've seen even your Care Crew coaching and customer success team do that with clients. I've done it myself as well. It's so important that, as this business gets more and more competitive, we're going to have less patients per dentist. It's just a matter of fact. So if we can make sure that they have allegiance to us, Vic, you spoke to character and why people come to the practice and how they feel when they're in there. All of this stuff bleeds together, that you have to maximize the patient experience with the patients that you have now, because we're not going to be of the ilk where we hang a shingle on the door and 2,000 people are going to show up in the next year. It's just changing, right?
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's changed so much. And like, it's hard to keep up with everything. It's hard to keep up with everything as a sole practice it's or even if you're in a partnership. I've just speaking with partnerships and just the different dynamics and what's going on in that partnership. And it's very difficult to run a practice, and with big entities coming in that you're competing with, essentially, that have systems in place. I mean, the vibe is not there, but I mean, it's very real that you would be able to compete against them if you have your ducks in a row, and if you are doing all the things that you need to do, and you have culture, and you have something special about your clinic, and you've developed your brand. I mean, that's super, super important, and more important now than ever, because brand was never a thing for us. I mean, most, as I can say on this panel, never a thing growing up. Brand was literally like Nike, right? Like, that's essentially it. And now it's personal, like, it's personal brand, like who you are, what you're doing, who you attribute yourself to. And I even just think, like, going in the future, that's only going to be amplified in dentistry. You're going to see it in dentistry, the brand, I go to this dental clinic, and I see it already. I already see it. And maybe because I'm in dental and experience, I go to this clinic, I see this specialist, I go here, and people post about it on social media, and they check into those locations. And they, and so whatever you're selling, these people are essentially buying as a clinic or as a patient, right? So it's just super, super important that we have the right people in place, doing the right jobs, because otherwise this whole thing is, I quite often use the Jenga block, and it's very, very easy to kind of explain. You have a Jenga, everyone knows the Jenga tower, and it builds from the bottom up, and it's all one nice brick. And then, if you don't have systems in place, that's not a very good brick. But if it starts off in a brick and you pull one from the bottom, we don't really need that system anymore because it's not really useful, and we're just going to throw it on the top, and you don't need that system. And it, kind of things fall by the wayside here, and things fall by the wayside here. And all of a sudden you have all this growth and building, maybe because you've seen 175 new patients, but like you don't have reliable staff that can check them in and out properly and rebook them. Then eventually your growth is really high up top, and your tower looks amazing, super tall and super cool up top, but on the foundation there's nothing there to support it. And then all of a sudden it all comes crumbling down because you didn't have the right things in place. And that's just like incredibly important to building a sustainable practice. And I think consistency is super important, and time and consistency are your best friends when building a practice, just to make sure that those building blocks are step by step, getting to where you need to be, and using tools like you said, Jamie, like the partnerships that we have, and using the team members that we have to build that is a crucial thing.
Well, yeah, I completely agree. And I've said this on a multitude of conversations, a multitude of dental presentations, that the new generation sort of assumes that a dentist is a dentist. They just do. I'm not speaking against continuing education and furthering your skills and getting better whatsoever. I think that is a must as a practitioner. But, the average millennial or the new Gen Z, they don't really think there's a difference. They think everybody went to school and they have the same capability. And that's okay, but it's the experience that's going to keep them coming back, right? It's when COVID hit, I'll give you an example. I said to my wife, for years, we just went out for dinner to just go out for dinner. And we would go to Earl's or we would go to Joey's, and it would be the same, and it was consistent and blah, blah, blah. Well, when restaurants shut down and money became tighter and things like that, you kind of start thinking, well, if I'm going to spend the money, I want the experience. I don't want to just go to Earl's and get the same thing that I get every time and wave at the same waitress that I wave at every time and blah, blah, blah. I want to go in and have a cool meal with somebody trying something new, a chef's menu, pair it with wine. And I'll do that maybe less often than I would go to Earl's, but I will do that. And when I do that, I'm not going to be afraid to spend money on the experience. I think dental needs to take a page out of that book, because I think more and more people want to be welcomed. They want to feel important. They want to know that their practice is taking all the safety precautions and is clean and the staff is friendly. That's the way they feel. And if we're not doing that for them, well, then I think it's naive to expect that we're going to have that kind of loyalty moving forward.
So many of the big DSOs, a lot of who's made up on their executive team are all ex-retail people. It's ex-Loblaws, it's ex-shoppers, it's even the terminology they use, it's stores, right? It's not practices. It's how many stores are we at, and that speaks to where it's going in terms of the experience is everything. You walk into the Apple store, you open your first Apple product. It's a very cool experience. It makes you feel good, and that same expectation is going to be of the case with dental.
Well, let's take your online scheduling, for example, Justin, right? I know when I get a message from my dentist and it says, please call me, how many messages do I get before I call? Because I'm busy and I'm in dental. I know the importance. I know that I need to get in there for my hygiene.
You're asking them to do something. You're asking the patient to do work, even it's as simple as a phone call. Nowadays, it's like, are you kidding me? Even exactly. A voicemail. You leave somebody a voicemail, and it's like, it's like you've given them a chore or something they have to do.
You're absolutely right. So now, you inject a CareCrew platform where it says click here to schedule, and I can do it all from my phone. I'll do that right away so I don't forget, right? I always allude to strategies on pre-appointing too. And I always say, if I've got an appointment to get my tires rotated and all of a sudden Cal Tires number shows up on my phone, I'll probably pick it up because it probably has something to do with the appointment that I have coming up. But if I don't have an appointment and they call me, there is no chance I am picking up that phone call. Zero chance, right? So it all alludes itself to all these little, Theresa, how do you articulate it? Doing the little things right so that the big things are
so just like consistently doing the small things that get you to big goals, like all the small things that get you to your attainable big goal, because it's all those small things that put it together into the big picture. They're little tiny puzzle pieces. And quite often I swear people think I'm stupid sometimes because they're telling me all these problems and I just sit there and go, and I'm literally putting the puzzle pieces together in my head of how I'm going to work myself out of this situation and what team members to apply. And that's essentially it, as I build the plan out, because I feel like that's the only way to get out of the situation. And if you're in this situation, building the plan out is super important. I think, Vic, you had something to chip in a little while ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, when thinking about competing with DSOs and like how things have changed so much, and the thing is, like, they continue to change, right? And so, like, big ships turn slow. So, like, the little guy can be like a nimble little skiff, and they can be making adjustments. I mean, obviously, I think about the marketing side, but like, do you see any DSOs on TikTok yet? Right, because it's so new. And they won't be for a while, but the clinics you can get there, get that cheap real estate, so to speak, now, and have that, build that presence, will be the ones that hold ground when, people who aren't the early adopters kind of move in. And so with things like Care Crew and that sort of thing, like if you grab that real estate now and take advantage of those sorts of things, and adopt technologies and early, you can be able to react a little more quickly than maybe some of these big, red tape bureaucratic organizations.
What I think too, I think that even goes to Mike. I think people, if we would have personally, if I had known that Mike even existed, because that's how new our relationship is. But if I had known that he even existed and there was a platform out there during all of my staffing issues, like when we were coming out of COVID, and I'm not like talking the first ones, but I'm talking like after my staff was fully engaged, I had everyone back that we were going to bring back. I mean, some people didn't come back because of family reasons and such, but essentially, like, after we had everyone back and we were going through that like ridiculous amount of patients that we were trying to get in, and we had nowhere to put them, and it was just bonkers. And we were like, oh, and then, but someone came in close contact, whatever. If I had had a resource like that, like, I just think my life would have been totally different. And I would have been able to like lean on, oh yeah, we got this person here, and, we can bring this person. I literally had to make my own temp list. I had it on a spreadsheet. I had 6 clinics learning off of it. And we were just trying to manage the chaos of that situation. I had 6 office managers, like, they talked to a temp, they put them on the list. And then another one be like, hey, are you willing to come here? Hey, we just like worked our own stuff because we were and it worked. We managed through it. Was it completely legit? I don't know, because now I'm realizing probably wasn't, but that's what we did to survive. And now I'm a little bit more knowledgeable, and that's okay. But I feel like if I had known these things maybe a little bit sooner, my life would have been a little bit easier. And like, there's the support systems out there that are there for a reason, that, industry experts have, that we can lean on a little bit. And I feel like dentistry doesn't like to lean on anyone, especially practice owners. They don't lean on anyone. And I think, creating these relationships is super important.
Yeah, 100%. And everybody on this panel, I have to say, like, is a piece of this puzzle. It's pretty amazing. Anybody listening should be leaning on. I love everything that everyone here does, and I've heard them talk a couple times now. So it's really powerful.
Yeah, I could definitely echo that, Mike. It's that symbiotic relationship I talked about with your supply rep. It's true for everybody on this call, right? It's the better the practice does, the better we all do. So I completely agree.
Yeah, it all kind of just frames out really nicely. I mean, this is why we put these people together, because they all have kind of a piece of this puzzle, and it creates a really great picture if we can get all the pieces together, right? And essentially, that's what's super important. I just wanted to take a minute and thank you guys for coming out. I think we're good to wrap up here. I think we discussed everything that I feel I need to discuss. Does anybody else want to throw anything out before I kind of do the sign off? No, you're good. It's Friday. Everyone's like, I'm out of here. Sun's shining. The golf tees are waiting. I mean, I don't know. I don't get out much, so I probably am gonna
None
go
of us
outside.
do.
But I really appreciate your time. I appreciate all the people that attended. Thank you so much. We're obviously recording this, and we'll send it out on different platforms as well, and people can use this for their own use. But super great to have you guys all here, and thank you, Tom, for putting together all the financials, and the team behind Tom for helping us out. We really appreciate it, and I know I own so big, and I look forward to seeing you guys some more. Your contact information I'm going to send out to all the people that registered so that they have that for you guys, and we can get you guys connected if anyone's interested in that. If anybody else has any questions, you can send them directly to me, and I will get you connected to the people on the panels here. And my email is optimizeddental@gmail.com. And yeah, so thank you so much. Enjoy your guys' Friday afternoons. I just wish you all the best, and enjoy what's left of the weekend.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Theresa.
Yeah, take care, guys.
Take care.